Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 251. The sucker is in place. Barbara, sedated, lay quietly in the medical chair. Although Batman didn't know the pace of her treatment, he still took a pile of medical reports and handed them to Thea. Thea glanced at the report in Batman's hand, which was as thick as a book, and took out 2 X-rays to look at them. She waved her hands to indicate that she didn't need to see the rest. How long would it take her to finish reading all these reports? She was planning to go home for dinner. It would take her until tomorrow morning to finish reading them all, right? Do you have X-ray vision like Superman? Batman saw that she was staring at Barbara intently while looking at the X-rays. She didn't turn over and there were several layers of clothes between her and Barbara, so what could she see? He endured it for a long time but finally asked. Far worse than him. In fact, the difference between the two was not that big, but Thea still said that her abilities in all aspects were inferior. Old Gordon didn't care about X-ray vision. He would use any means necessary to save his daughter. He roughly pushed Batman aside and asked, Thea, do you think Barbara's injuries can be cured? Batman knew his old friend was resentful of him, but what could he do? He couldn't wrestle Gordon to the ground and beat him up, so he could only stand by and watch silently with a wry smile. Thea carefully examined Barbara's injuries. They weren't serious. With current technology, this would definitely be a life-threatening injury, but for a magic user, especially Thea, who had a wealth of light-based spells, it would be a matter of minutes. But she couldn't just heal him. The more precious something was, the more complicated it was to obtain. If she made it too quick, they'd think, huh? So easy? I'll treat you to a meal as a thank you. It's too dark in here. My spells require a lot of light energy, so they won't be very effective here. Can we go outside to heal? Thea made a formal inspection and turned to the two of them. Just in case they didn't believe her, she summoned a ball of light. This wasn't an act. This place was deep underground, and it'd have a significant impact on the absorption of light elements. Then let's go to my old house. We can go straight up from here. This request was quite normal. Batman felt a little regretful that he couldn't use the high-tech equipment in the Batcave to record Thea's spellcasting, but he still led her to the elevator to the side with a calm expression. Old Gordon, pushing his unconscious daughter, followed them. The 4 of them took an elevator through the pitch-black cavern. Soon, Batman opened a secret door, revealing a luxurious living room. Welcome to the Wayne family, Miss Thea. This is my butler, Alfred Pennyworth, Batman introduced to Thea, pointing to the old butler who had arrived at the scene after hearing the noise. Thea admired the loyal butler, and after a few compliments, they wasted no time and arrived at the Wayne family's open lawn. Thea surveyed the area, motioned for them to stay aside, and began drawing a healing circle. She used celestial magic from the unicorn's memories. Even if Batman later questioned the magician Zatanna about the circle, he wouldn't be able to get any information, as they were not related to the same system. Furthermore, Thea didn't think Batman would discuss magic with his childhood friend, Zatanna. After a full half-hour of drawing, a sacred and ethereal pattern appeared on the Wayne family lawn. The old housekeeper felt a pang of grief for their lawn. He'd cared for the flowers and plants for so many years, and now they were shattered by Thea's scribbling. He was deeply distressed, but seeing Commissioner Gordon's sullen face, he suppressed a word. Thea sweet-dropped a few times, feigning exhaustion. Come on, let Barbara in. Forget it, you'll ruin my circle. I'll do it myself. She enveloped the unconscious Barbara with her magic, levitated above the ground, and landed directly in the center of the circle. This small demonstration of her skill bolstered the confidence of the others. The spell should have taken only a minute, but Thea artificially prolonged it, chanting, gesturing, and circling the circle for a full hour before finally stopping. Almost done. The remaining magic will flow automatically. After a long day of hard work, Thea sat down to rest, took out her phone, and composed a text message to Moira, announcing that she had found her victim and asked her to call and cooperate with her. Despite the lack of prior communication between mother and daughter, Moira understood perfectly. The call was quickly answered. Initially, the two spoke in whispers, but their voices grew louder until finally, Moira's choked sobs reached the line, and Thea hung up. Gordon and the others looked at each other, unsure what to do. Miss Thea, are you facing a difficult situation? I wonder if I can help. Old Gordon, unsure if his daughter's injuries had healed, watched Barbara, enveloped in a cerulean aura within the magic circle, fearing something might be wrong with Thea. Of course, Thea couldn't just answer the question, so she feigned defiance several times, saying she was fine. But Commissioner Gordon, feeling deeply indebted to her, pressed her repeatedly, forcing Thea to cleverly link her abilities to the Temple of Artemis. Repairing the temple, Batman, Old Gordon, and the old butler, a combined age of over 150, were stunned by the suddenness of the topic. Hearing that the ability was a gift from the gods, they felt it made sense to explain Thea's sudden magical abilities. Mrs. Quinn doesn't want you to come in person, Old Gordon, upon receiving a definitive answer, pondered the matter. Ultimately, he felt the favor he owed was too great, and he wouldn't be able to sleep well if he didn't repay it. Besides, this matter would only attract some controversy, not cause any serious trouble. It wasn't dangerous, so he decided to take it on himself. I think, Commissioner Gordon said before Batman interrupted him. Let me handle this. Gordon felt he owed Thea a favor, but Bruce Wayne owed him even more. He owed not only Thea but also Gordon and his daughter. The Commissioner could foresee the controversy it would cause, and his intelligence was even greater. He was nearing retirement, and taking on this matter right before his death would be a stain on his lifelong reputation. He didn't care. The name Bruce Wayne was essentially associated with notoriety. His entry into the Gotham police force was somewhat better, but there were still only a handful of media outlets in the world that hadn't criticized him. I have enough social prestige and thick skin, so it's perfect for me to do this myself. He quietly asked Thea for some details, and she pretended to be embarrassed, but Batman was very determined. Compared to what you've helped us with, this matter is insignificant, so leave it to me. After several attempts to refuse, Thea finally accepted the plan after several people's persuasion. Chapter 252 Clown. Having achieved her goal, Thea artificially sped up the healing process, finally concluding the treatment after half an hour. Why hasn't Barbara woken up yet? Did it fail? Old Gordon asked anxiously, seeing Barbara still in her usual state. Thea, perplexed, took a closer look. Bruce injected a bit too much sedative into her system. So, stunned, the others frantically chattered until Barbara finally awoke. Old Gordon first asked how his daughter was feeling. Barbara, dazed for a moment, finally realized the treatment was over. Incredibly, she touched her lower back. I think I can feel it, the old director supported her as she took a few shaky steps. The first few steps were terrifying, but as they progressed, her stride grew steadier. Appreciating their support, Thea watched with a smile for another hour. Thank you. Realizing she was completely back to normal, Barbara gave Thea a big hug. Then, feeling a bit neglectful, she listed everyone present before finally letting up. Commissioner Gordon, in tears, tried to stop Thea from leaving, not relenting until he had driven her to the helipad in the back mountains. His gratitude was overflowing with words. At that moment, he might as well blow up the White House, let alone build a temple in Turkey. Thea had just started the plane, making a deafening noise. Seeing the old commissioner waving at her repeatedly, she assumed it was a farewell and ignored it. But when she saw him waving his hands, sweat pouring from his forehead, she realized something was wrong. He stopped the plane and asked, "What's wrong?" Bruce called and told us to get back. He's in the Batcave, and it's urgent. Commissioner Gordon hurriedly put down his phone and shouted at her at the top of his lungs. Could something have happened to Barbara again? That couldn't be right. They had no choice but to rush to the Batcave with old Gordon again. This time, there was no time to walk slowly. Commissioner Gordon was so anxious he almost broke into a run. Thea's high heels and short skirt made it impossible for her to move quickly, so she used her magic to wrap herself in a semi-levitating pattern, following him into the cave. Entering the cave, the two found Barbara perfectly fine, punching and kicking to recover. Batman was joined by a sturdy man, 1.80 meters tall and weighing 200 kilograms. He didn't have time to introduce him to Thea. Batman paused for a moment. "Miss Thea, I didn't want to bother you any further, but this matter involves you." He then clicked on the indoor monitor. "This is the citywide broadcast from 10 minutes ago." 10 minutes ago? Thea knew Batman was a resolute man. If he said it involved her, then it probably involved her. She'd have to wait and see. The snow on the monitor lasted less than 30 seconds before a predictable figure appeared on the screen. Ha ha. 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 Damn Bat. Did you get my gift? I heard that little red-haired beauty is your assistant." His pale face, the dark circles under his eyes, betrayed a madness, but the most striking thing was his crimson lips and the large gashes on his sides. This character was too famous. Batman's nemesis. The Joker. Thea only remembered that she had said that this guy was locked up by Batman, but she didn't expect him to run away so soon. He almost defeated Barbara with one blow. Thea couldn't help but look at Barbara. The red-haired beauty was trembling all over. It was hard to tell whether she was angry or afraid. But it was probably both. The Joker on the screen took out a knife from his dark purple suit, smoothed his dry yellow hair, and made a smile that he thought was very elegant, but his smile didn't seem to be happy at all. "I know you have been looking for me like crazy. What are you doing? Are you seeking revenge? You psychopath." "Haha," the Joker on the screen shouted at the camera. Thea saw from the corner of her eye that Batman looked at the screen blankly as if he didn't hear anything. "I've gone to great lengths to find someone crucial to the stinky bats. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce this distinguished guest to you." "What? You asked for his name? I honestly don't know it, but maybe he'll reveal it himself," the Joker pretentiously addressed the camera, then suddenly pulled a chair from the side of the screen, with a teenager strapped to it. He tore off the tape from the teenager's mouth, gesturing repeatedly at his face with a knife. "Haha. Can you tell us your name, everyone?" Seeing this, Thea could only describe her feelings with one word: WTF. The Joker had kidnapped Damian Wayne. If I remember correctly, Talia had entrusted her son to the Ninja Master. How could a common man like the Joker go to South Darbet and, under the noses of a group of thieves, assassins, and ninja masters, actually snatch him away? You know, Thea had been planning to target the Ninja Master as a long-term target, and this guy had actually gone in alone, and the most shocking thing was, he'd succeeded. Damian Wayne on the screen had a remarkable mental fortitude. "My grandfather was a ninja master." "You lunatic, let me go." 6-year-old Damian knew Batman's identity couldn't be revealed. He was simply using these threats to express his displeasure and send a signal to the Ninja Master's spies outside. The Joker chuckled and pushed Damian aside. Thea suspected he knew Batman's true identity. To him, this was all a game without winners or losers. Damian's cleverness was worthless. "Cut here," the Joker turned and ordered one of his men. The screen went black, but soon a series of photos appeared. Although some were blurry, a red figure could still be seen flying through the air. Damn. Thea finally understood why Batman had called her back. Wasn't that her? This should be the scene of the explosion of the Arkham gas pipeline that led to the ambush of Solomon Grundy. There weren't many photos, and the Joker quickly returned to the center of the screen. "This guy is Stinky Bat's new partner. He seems to be related to him in some way. I spent a lot of time tracking him down, and finally, found him." Thea's heart instantly sank. This guy found out her identity? He wouldn't go to Star City to commit crimes, would he? Malcolm was a big villain after all, so it was unlikely he would catch him, and Diana was even less likely. Could it be Moira or Felicity? "We found her sister. The mother of this brave boy. What a great motherly love. She graciously agreed to stay with me, risking her life alone for her son. Stinky Bat, you better hurry and save her." Ha, ha, ha. The Joker finished, and the screen went completely black. "My sister? Who is she?" Thea was a little dazed. It seemed like I only had 2 brothers, so who was the sister? Thinking about the previous and subsequent events, a not-so-distant memory surfaced in her mind. This guy had captured Talia. Chapter 253, Second-Generation Robin. Thea's admiration for this man could only be described as overwhelming. This fellow had not only stolen the Ninja Master's grandson but also captured his daughter. He was the only one who could embody the concept of courting death so fully. As a common person without any special powers, any technological equipment, or any combat training, he was truly unique in daring to offend the Ninja Master so terribly. Talia and Damian were of no concern to Thea. It was possible to ignore them and go home to eat, but it was inappropriate for her to walk away just after Batman had agreed to take the blame. Besides, the Joker had already noticed her, and if she didn't get rid of him, who knew if Star City would be affected? Thea didn't take this so-called high IQ criminal seriously. If one magic spell couldn't solve it, she'd use 2. How could they fight with such different worldviews? "What's your plan?" Thea looked at Batman sternly. His wife and child had been captured, and Barbara was seriously injured. He'd be a coward if he didn't have any ideas. Let's split up. Do you have your gear? Batman suddenly realized that Thea's professional attire and high heels didn't seem suitable for combat. She pulled out a travel bag from her space ring and gestured to him. The few who had seen her magic were fine, but Jason Todd, the future Red Hood and current second-generation Robin, was genuinely startled. He rubbed his eyes but couldn't figure out where the large bag had appeared. The Joker seems to have held the two of you separately. Let's each go in a different direction and rescue them quickly. From what I can tell, he should be in this chemical plant. I'll go there. Batman pointed to a spot on the map. The rest of the machining plant is yours. Okay, Thea said, and prepared to change clothes with Barbara. With her physique, she could wear a combat uniform or not, but ordinary clothes were always a bit awkward in combat, and after being shot, the holes in her clothes made it easy to expose her. Wait, Jason Todd shouted, stopping the group. Mr. Bruce, what about me? It's not that I distrust this young lady, I just think she needs some help. Your training isn't complete yet, Bruce, now dressed in his batsuit, said, his voice deep and magnetic. 2 gunshots rang out, and Jason Todd shouted in frustration, my marksmanship is up to the task, guns are for the weak. Batman recited a famous quote from his father-in-law, the Ninja Master, but Jason Todd ignored it. Batman was also troubled. This second-generation Robin was too driven. He wouldn't listen to any advice, so he had no choice but to resort to fists and kicks. I can't beat you, that's normal. But I don't believe this woman can be any better than me. Jason Todd, battered and bruised, was even more upset. Being beaten so publicly was a bit of a challenge for his pride. Oh. What's wrong with women? Do you want to see the power of women? Their domestic violence had nothing to do with Thea, but Jason Todd's sudden mention of women reminded Thea of Diana, who had once been deeply dissatisfied with the current state of gender discrimination, and her anger boiled over. Jason Todd's silence made his stance clear. Thea could only give Batman a provocative look. Don't blame me. Batman's eyes twitched slightly, and he shook his head slightly, implying that a lesson would be enough, not a crippling blow. HMPH, Thea stood 10 meters away, right hand extended, aiming at Jason Todd. As he stared at her, her magical power erupted. The air resounded like thunder, and Jason Todd's massive body seemed to be struck by a sledgehammer, his feet lifted from the ground and sent flying 5 or 6 meters. If Jason Todd had been a bit more prepared, he wouldn't have been so disastrous. But he hadn't seen all of Thea's methods, and now, caught off guard, he fell to the ground with a thud. The Batcave was a cave, and Master Bruce had a lot of technological equipment, but the floor wasn't paved, and the ground was uneven. This fall was a real hard knock. Barbara had long been dissatisfied with this big, stupid guy. In her heart, only one person was worthy of the title of Robin, and this rough guy was nothing. Now, seeing his misfortune, she almost laughed out loud. Not to mention Jason Todd's 200-pound muscles were incredible, and his physique was at the peak of the average person. This blow would have put an ordinary person on the bed for a day, but for him, it was just a dizzy spell. He rubbed his head, climbed to his feet, and shouted, "You're using witchcraft. I don't accept it. Do you dare to challenge me with your shooting skills? Okay, let's have a literary competition." No offense, Thea suddenly thought of a passage from a novel. Literary competition, what is this? Not only Jason Todd didn't understand, not a single person in the room had ever seen a Webby. You shoot me first. If you hit me, you win. Then I'll shoot you. Do you dare? Thea said scornfully. I'm not responsible if anything happens to you, Jason Todd said uncertainly, raising his pistol and aiming at Thea. Thea said nothing, but hooked her finger, signaling him to shoot. Jason Todd could now see she was no ordinary person, but he still didn't aim for her fatal spot. He fired continuously, bang bang, at her limbs, until his gun was completely empty. Only then did he stare at Thea, dumbfounded. Of course, Thea wouldn't just stand there and take the bullets. She was still a long way from possessing a body of steel. Now that she had acquired half of Ares' divine power, her dynamic vision far surpassed even the ones on Paradise Island. Facing the German soldiers, every bullet mark was visible to her. She deftly gathered all the bullets in her hand, smiled at Jason Todd, and spread her palm, revealing the bullets. Unfortunately, I missed. Is it my turn? What the hell is this? Jason Todd was completely dumbfounded. He checked his service pistol again. Yes, it was indeed his gun, not a fake one. But how could this be possible? Seeing Thea smilingly accept the pistol Barbara handed her, he felt extremely regretful. He didn't have the ability to catch a bullet. No matter how much muscle he had, it couldn't stop a bullet. But he couldn't afford to give in. With his personality, he could only grit his teeth and prepare to fight. "Alright, Barbara, take Thea to change clothes. Let's get going." Batman watched Thea slowly raise her gun and knew she wouldn't kill his new assistant. Although he wanted to teach Jason Todd a lesson, he felt that his wife and children were more important. He told her to stop playing around because they had business to attend to. Chapter 254, The Crushed Harley Quinn. The costume change was swift. Besides preventing exposure during firefights, it also served to conceal her features. With her current strength, Thea could fully utilize her skateboard's top speed of 400 km per hour without any stress-resistant gear. The skateboard, which had once driven Ares to ecstasy with its speed, could no longer keep up with her enhanced capabilities. She desperately needed faster and more powerful technology. After finding out the target's location, she took the communicator Barbara had handed her and separated from Batman in the Batplane. Barbara, now quite skilled in computer science, relayed various messages from the Batcave. As for Jason Todd, even if he was reckless, it would take him several days to recover from the trauma of today. "Thea, Batman's already engaged." Just as Thea finished surveying the battlefield, Barbara relayed the real-time situation from the other side. "He's quite anxious," Thea muttered softly. Batman wasn't as indifferent to their relationship and Talia and her son as he let on. They arrived at the target location at about the same time. Thea's Eye of Horus had barely taken a quick look when he rushed in. Charging without even basic reconnaissance, this was definitely not the kind of combat skill one would acquire after years of navigating Gotham. The original agreement was to attack simultaneously, and Thea, finding no heavy weapons inside, she sheathed her skateboard and blasted the gate open with an arrow, charging in. Against these modern, armed criminals, Thea employed no magic or chosen talents. She simply used the magical arrows of her divine bow, activated the Eye of Horus, and, ignoring obstacles and distance, struck one per person with her arrows. From the moment she entered the machine shop, within 2 minutes, 7 or 8 criminals had already fallen to her arrows. The factory had been abandoned for years and was in a state of disarray. Penetrating too many objects would severely deplete the Eye of Horus's range, and it took Thea a full 5 minutes to locate her target. "Barbara, tell Batman I'm targeting his son." "Roger that." The Joker's minion shared his own trait, madness. Thea held back completely, killing everyone she saw. Her intimidation proved completely ineffective. The gang, acting as if they hadn't noticed, hid in corners and fired furiously, sporadically blasting rockets and grenades. They didn't even consider the serious question of whether firing such powerful weapons indoors would bury everyone. As expected, mental illness was the most terrifying. With a shake of her head, Thea shot 2 more bazooka wielders at. "Hey, kid, you're pretty sharp, aren't you? Why are you glaring at me?" Damian Wayne wasn't hard to find, or perhaps these psychopaths hadn't tried to hide him. Thea found Batman's son in a cluttered room and, seeing the tape still covering his mouth, she tore it off. "Stupid. A sneak attack," the child lashed out, but he finally warned Thea. Thea's psychic sense had already detected the person behind her, but she was afraid they might use Damian as a hostage, so she deliberately exposed her weakness, both to provoke a sneak attack and to give herself an opportunity to reach Damian. Now, facing the enemy's flying kick from behind, she twisted with her left hand to block the opponent's sweeping blow. As the opponent's body hovered in midair, exposed to every ounce of damage, she clenched her right fist and struck him in the stomach. Bang! Though she lacked a robotic arm, Thea's physical strength was no less than that of Bane after guzzling poison. The opponent was sent flying into the wall, where a large hole was punched through, sending him flying 5 or 6 meters before landing on the ground. Just as she was about to untie Damian's ropes, Thea sensed something was amiss. A mental scan revealed that the enemy she had sent flying was still alive. Could the Joker have such a powerful subordinate? But as she saw the man slowly rise from the pile of debris, wearing his signature red and blue jacket and impressive figure, Thea realized there weren't just a bunch of random soldiers here, but a real, well-known figure. This one, with a slightly crazed expression and clutching a large baseball bat, must be Harley Quinn. Yet, this person, having taken a direct hit from him, managed to stand shakily. She was wearing only a filthy tank top, and her lower abdomen was bare of armor and even clothing, leaving only the marks of his fist. This definitely wasn't the physique of an average person. Had she been injected with some kind of enhancement? Interesting. This person would have been a real hassle to deal with when he first arrived in Gotham, but now, Are you Talia's sister? You're way better than her. Harley Quinn stood up, but the pain of that punch was unbearable. She felt like her intestines were about to rupture, and she was just trying to hold on. She's not my mother's sister. She's pretending. Before Thea could even say anything, the bratty kids beside her were already vehemently protesting. 3 dark lines crossed Thea's forehead. You think your family is so great? You're pretending. With the square face of Talia's sister, Nyssa, I wouldn't even bother pretending. Bratty kids are the worst. If it weren't for Batman, I'd beat the shit out of you. Frustrated, Thea didn't bother explaining the wonderful misunderstanding. In fact, she welcomed it. Joker duo, if you have any grievances in the future, go find the Ninja Master. Of course, it would be even better if you mistakenly thought I was a relative of Darkseid. Imagine the Joker blasting Apocalypse into cosmic dust. Stop talking nonsense, come here. Thea skillfully cast a magical hand, dragging Harley Quinn, who was standing there trying to talk a few more words, stalling for time while her body healed, to her. What a pity. Thea took a closer look. While her face was painted red and blue, giving her a ghostly look from a distance, she was actually quite pretty, with a figure every man's dream these days. But she was a psychopath. Damien, the naughty kid, fell silent at this point, no longer daring to rant about impersonation. From his perspective, he saw Thea wave, and Harley Quinn, a living being, leapt off the ground and appeared before them. It was as if a pair of invisible hands were strangling her neck. Even though Damien, precocious yet only 6 years old, was still quite shocked. He glanced at Thea's heavily masked face. Was this person really here to save him? Could she also be his father's enemy? Despite trying to stay calm, his legs felt a little weak. Damn it, what's that look in your eyes? Harley Quinn, nearly suffocated, was not afraid of death, but Thea's look at her as if she were a rare animal infuriated her. She drew her personal revolver and shot Thea in the head. The person was still able to move? This was a bit unexpected for Thea. He held the bullet between 2 fingers. And as Thea stared in horror, he grabbed her pistol and tested it with his hands. The gun felt really good, but unfortunately, Thea had no love for it. Chapter 255 Topics worthy of study. The gun was a fine one, its performance was excellent in every way. As for the human, Thea couldn't stop studying Harley Quinn. Was she going to strangle her or shoot her? Never mind. She was a woman after all. Why bother another woman? Let's see if she could be saved. Thea abandoned the idea of killing Harley Quinn outright and silently channeled her mental power, attempting to brainwash her again. But for the first time, her tried and true magic met with a setback. Harley Quinn actually resisted her mind invasion. This was truly novel. Thea increased her magical output once again. Initially, the flow was steady, but it was quickly overwhelmed by a powerful mental wave, resulting in a draw. Ultimately, Thea, fearing the intense mental wave would fry Harley Quinn's brain, unilaterally withdrew her magical power. This guy had actually managed to resist mental magic with his frantic willpower. Seeing such an unmagical thing for the first time, Thea grew increasingly curious. Seeing Harley Quinn's face etched with pain, she imagined the struggle between the two forces within her mind must have been a tremendous burden. If she could resist it, wouldn't the Joker's mental resistance be even greater? I'll spare your life today. I'll find some psychopaths in Star City later to investigate. Thea turned her gun and knocked Harley Quinn unconscious with a butt. She untied Damien and tossed him Harley Quinn's gun for self-defense. Thea contacted the Batcave. Barbara, the child's been rescued. How's Batman doing? Do you need my help? Before Barbara could say anything, Batman's voice rang out, you go back. I'll be right there. The fight on Batman's side was evident, as the sound of gunfire and the crackle of his fists hitting his opponent's face continued. Son, dear Batman, since he says he doesn't need help, forget it. His relationship with the Joker is complicated, so outsiders should stay out of it. After placing Harley Quinn sideways on the back of her skateboard, Thea asked Damien, kid, are you afraid of heights? You. How dare you look down on me? My grandfather was a ninja master. Damien, though a little awed by her bizarre abilities, still grumbled with disapproval. Alright, got it. Stand still and don't move, Thea interrupted his boasting, placing him in front of her. What's so great about that? If the ninja master didn't have Sangongmo hiding behind him, I'd have taken care of him long ago. Pulling Damien along, they slowly flew out of the machining center. Facing the corpses, Damien was a little surprised. Are you really one of my father's companions? He doesn't kill people. Each of the bodies on the ground had been fatal, and it was clear the attacker hadn't hesitated at all. Damien, having already begun training with a ninja master, could tell. However, the lack of any weapon marks on these people's fatal wounds left the 6-year-old somewhat baffled. He wondered how Thea had managed to kill so many people. I'm not one of his men, and I'm not from Gotham. He can't control me. Thea didn't bother to brag to her child about her bloody experiences in Gotham. She'd been in and out of Arkham so many times, leaving the ground littered with corpses, and Batman hadn't said anything. He must have known her habits when he sent her to rescue people. Besides, she didn't kill them all. There was still a named person left behind on the skateboard. After leaving the factory, Thea added an air shield to Damien, effectively protecting him from the stress of high-speed flight. As for the unconscious Harley Quinn, she seemed much stronger than an average person, so she was left alone. The skateboard was incredibly fast, returning to the Batcave in 20 minutes. Knowing that Batman was still finishing up, Thea handed Harley Quinn over to Barbara, leaving it up to them to kill or slash her. She changed back into her clothes and used the Batcave's network to handle some work remotely. As the president of Quinn Enterprise, she had little free time, constantly plagued by a mountain of trivial matters. To avoid disappointing Moira, she forced herself to deal with them. Fortunately, her divine transformation had given her a far superior intelligence and wisdom, allowing her to find time to handle official duties without significantly impacting her intensive training. Although 6-year-old Damien was precocious, he felt a little apprehensive at being suddenly thrust into a completely unfamiliar environment, surrounded by strangers. Barbara was paying attention to Batman's battle situation. Jason Todd hid far away when he saw Thea come in. Both of them ignored him. Old Gordon was very friendly. He asked if the child was hungry or thirsty. He looked like he was coaxing a child, which made Damien a little depressed. When he saw Thea change back into her casual clothes, he was a little stunned by her urban beauty. Although he said he would not admit defeat, he was still a little shocked in his heart. This woman is so beautiful. Walking slowly to Thea, taking a look at the documents on her laptop, Damien pretended to be nonchalant and asked, "Are you also an employee of Wayne Enterprises? You are very motivated at work." Thea was amused by this naughty child. "I say again, I am not your father's subordinate. Although the market value of my company is not as good as Wayne Enterprises, the gap is not that big. Not everyone can hire me. Will you accept the job?" Damien asked in a low voice. Thea tore her eyes away from the office documents, wondering what the child meant by that. "You want to hire me? I'm not short of money." Before she could finish her words, she was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps. "Thea, come help." She fell into the sulfuric acid pool. It was Batman's voice, and it shook his usually composed voice. Could something earth-shattering have happened again? Thea put away her laptop and hurried over. Oh my God. As she approached Batman, she could smell a strong, corrosive odor. His batsuit was stained with a smear of unknown chemicals, but he paid no attention to himself, his gaze fixed on the woman in his arms. Looking at the woman before her, corroded beyond all recognition by the various chemicals, was this Talia? Thea glanced down at Damien, who had followed. The child clenched her fists tightly, her face taut, trying hard not to cry. Was it really Talia? Thea studied the woman's features again. The corrosion was severe, but she could still vaguely see the image of her 80-round battle with her that day. "Thea, she's seriously injured. Can you please save her life first?" Batman was completely out of control, his usual composure gone. He was constantly injecting various injections into Talia's body, trying to keep her heart beating. "Let me do it." Thea pushed Batman aside and fully activated the Eye of Horus, searching for various toxic and harmful substances that were eroding her body functions. The situation was extremely grim. Various chemicals were madly attacking her body. If it weren't for Batman's continuous injections, she would have died long ago. Chapter 256 The Best Treatment. A vast array of chemicals, acidic, alkaline, metallic, and non-metallic, were entering Talia's body. Thea didn't act this time. After all this time spent training, her magic had become quite proficient, otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to perform such delicate work. She continuously enveloped the toxins within Talia's body with her magic. Unaware of the potential harm of the green substance, she didn't dare extract it through her pores. Thea simply made a large cut in Talia's arm and squeezed out a large mass of unknown chemicals. Her heartbeat has stabilized. Batman had been watching the various instruments. Now that the chemicals had been extracted, he knew Talia's vitals had been saved, and his efforts had finally paid off. Huh? Thea breathed a sigh of relief. She was under the greatest pressure. The mental and spiritual drain had been considerable, but the magical operation wasn't complete yet. Talia's condition had gone from near death to a state of near death. If Thea left her alone, she would essentially be in a vegetative state. Talia still had a significant amount of chemicals in her body, many of which had already adhered to her internal organs. Thea's chemistry knowledge was far from sufficient to identify all the classifications. Initially, she only extracted the ones she knew were lethal. She wasn't so sure about the rest, fearing a reaction between two substances could kill Talia. This was where the incredibly skilled Batman stepped in. Upon learning of Thea's dilemma, he offered to take care of it himself, eliminating the need for help and going off to work on the milling and grinding equipment. Naturally, Thea couldn't sit idle, pulling out her laptop, connecting to the internet, and analyzing the situation on the spot. Whenever she felt unsure, she consulted Batman, the computer-like figure. Several more highly harmful chemicals were extracted, leaving the rest far more difficult to assess. Fortunately, Batman, incredibly skilled, acted swiftly, dismantling something. In half an hour, he fashioned a metal rod-like object. By sweeping it through Talia's body, he collected trace elements emitted from her body and connected it to the Batcave's main computer, analyzing the substance's properties and toxicity. This eliminated Thea's blind guesswork, which seemed much more reliable. Batman would often calculate the ratios of various chemicals, trying to determine if they would harm capillaries, the intestines, or the respiratory tract. Sometimes, 4 or 5 substances would be mixed together, creating such a complex web of relationships that even a master student like Batman couldn't quite grasp. Thea, too lazy to bother figuring out what he couldn't figure out, simply resorted to brute force, making deep cuts near the unidentified chemicals to extract them first. Damien watched from a distance as Thea sliced her mother's body with wounds, heartbroken, yet aware that this was a life-saving moment. He watched their efforts with a sense of unease. Barbara and Jason Todd joined in, bandaging the wounds and cleaning the floor. The entire Batcave smelled incredibly good, the stench of blood mixed with the countless chemicals extracted from Talia's body, making Barbara dizzy and clutching her nose. Jason Todd was a tough guy, but his shaky feet made it clear he was struggling. "Are you okay?" Batman sent old Gordon and Damien out first, but after a while, he could barely hold on. He was so close. He felt his vision blacking out. He knew he was still under the effects of the chemicals, so he pulled out a gas mask and put it on to clear his head, which only made him feel better. But seeing that Thea looked calm and bloodless, he couldn't help but ask, "Huh?" Thea was studying the dark brown substance lingering near Talia's kidney. Without a second thought, she replied, "The smell doesn't affect me." Batman nodded, understanding. "It's just super endurance. You're not the first person with this ability. It's nothing unusual. I'll make a note of it later." Unaware that Batman's little black book had added a note about her super endurance right after her clairvoyance to her profile, Thea had already mentioned it. After helping out for half an hour, Barbara felt she had done her duty. What did she have to do with Talia? Excusing her injuries, she went home to sleep. This day's experience was truly remarkable for her. She'd arrived at the Batcave lying down, and now she could walk back home like nothing had happened. She needed to go home and reflect on whether this day had been a dream. Jason Todd, truly a manly man, saw that Thea was fine, and, undeterred, he didn't even wear a gas mask. Unlike Batman, he didn't engage in close combat, occasionally stepping to the cave entrance for air. He managed to outlast Barbara by an hour, finally resting against the wall. During the trip, Thea called Star City. Talia's injuries were so complex that she wouldn't be able to make it home for dinner. Batman politely offered to treat her, but Thea waved her hand, suggesting they bring the man back from the brink of death first. The two worked together all night. Catwoman, who hadn't been seen all day, greeted Thea and noticed they were treating Talia. Though a bit jealous, she didn't say much, seeing how utterly disfigured she looked, barely recognizable as human. She stayed inside for a moment, but, finding the odor too inhuman, She excused herself and left. Finally, just as the sun was about to rise, the two completed the treatment. Using Batman's homemade scanning device, they checked Talia's system twice, clearing it of all toxic and harmful substances. However, the long-term presence of the chemicals had taken a devastating toll on her health, severely damaging every organ in her body. Her recovery, let alone her ability to function normally, was questionable. Miss Thea, follow-up treatment, Batman trailed off. Saving Barbara was already a debt he owed her, and now he couldn't repay the old debt, so why would he start over? He was already very grateful that Thea could help him all night, but seeing Talia in the state of being like a living dead, and remembering the passionate woman in the past, his heart was in pain. In the end, he had to go against his own principles and shamelessly ask for help. It seems that Catwoman's task of changing her name from Selina Kyle to Selina Wayne is really a bit difficult. Who said that Batman has no feelings for Talia? Thea sighed a little. After all, she and Catwoman have a deeper friendship, but she couldn't refuse Batman's request for help. In fact, the best way to treat Talia is the Lazarus Pool of the Ninja Master. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 257 Follow-up Treatment. The Lazarus Pool. Batman's eyes lit up for a moment, but then fell silent again, as if remembering something. No, the Ninja Master said that the pool's water connects to the demonic realm, and anyone who soaks in it will have their souls dragged into hell. The Master has watched many of his children and descendants die of natural causes, and he's never let any of them soak in the pool. Batman shook his head, rejecting the idea. Demonic territory, souls dragged into hell. Thea compared the information she knew and couldn't see it. The Ninja Master was really good to his son-in-law, sharing such a private conversation with him. Talia might not even know these things. Thea immediately dismissed the idea of dragging Batman into the fight against the Ninja Master. Their relationship was much better than she'd imagined. It seemed I had to treat him. For such a serious injury, simply using magic to heal it would be very exhausting for Thea, and she didn't want to save him. How did Talia get injured like this? Batman seemed reluctant to recall, but he briefly explained. She was pushed into the chemical pool by the Joker. Thea nodded. This was quite consistent with the Joker's habit, jumping into the chemical pool for a bath whenever he had nothing to do. He and Harley Quinn were highly resistant to poison, but someone as delicate as Talia couldn't handle it. However, through the pool, Thea finally found a treatment method. It was a method originally found on the Sphere of Horus, a method between magic and ritual. The ancient Egyptian pharaohs were obsessed with achieving immortality, trying all kinds of experiments, both humane and inhumane. Combining sorcery, magic, and alchemy, they actually found some methods, and they recorded the proven ones on the handle of the Sphere of Horus. Back on the Waverider, the artificial intelligence Gideon even translated a lot of relevant information for Thea. Look, I have a way to save her, but ancient magic isn't the same as modern magic, so some conditions aren't available. I need some time to prepare. Besides, Talia is too weak right now. The magic is supposed to speed up her recovery, but her current condition doesn't allow for repair. Can you provide her with enough nutrients through medical means? I'll go back and prepare, and you can bring her to Star City for treatment in a week. You know I just took over the Quinn organization, and I'm super busy every day. Thea spread her hands, indicating that she couldn't come to Gotham every day to save your wife. Since you're a free man anyway, why don't you come to Star City? Okay, I'll leave everything to you. These days, patients always try to accommodate doctors, not doctors. Batman thought this was normal. Well versed in medicine, he knew that Talia's current condition wasn't the best time for treatment. The two agreed to contact each other again. Thea instructed him not to force Talia to wake up, and to keep her under anesthesia if possible. She then flew away from the Wayne mansion alone. After Thea left his sight, she didn't head straight back to Star City, but instead took a detour to a residential area in Gotham. Thea. Long time no see. The girl, Shadow, the young beauty who had been abducted from Purgatory Island, greeted her with a smile. How's your father? You weren't very clear on the phone. Shadow's expression shifted strangely at the mention of her father, a mixture of confusion, bewilderment, and a glimmer of hope. Come and see, Thea had always been curious about the court's resurrection technology. She had just returned to Star City when she received a call from Shadow, saying Yao Fei's heartbeat had miraculously returned, and she'd stopped by to check it out. Shadow now lived alone in a rented apartment with her father. A forensic examination revealed that Yao Fei had been shot in the head that day. Thanks to genetic repair technology, the missing brain tissue had grown back, but no one could say for sure whether his previous memories would be restored. Yao Fei's condition was similar to many vegetative states. His heartbeat and breathing were present, but his consciousness was almost completely blank. Shadow accepted this finding, believing that there was always hope in life. Knowing that further action would depend solely on the patient's recovery, she refused the court's decision and cared for her father alone, working part-time at a Chinese restaurant to cover their expenses. As Thea entered the small room they had lived in for over a month, she could see how much Shadow had devoted to her father. The bedroom was fresh and well organized. Old man Yao Fei lay in bed, his eyes closed, his expression serene. Aside from the shaved bald spot where his once wild hair had once been, there was nothing unusual about him. Using the eye of Horus to observe his condition, Thea discovered that the court's diagnosis was correct. Yao Fei's head wound had healed, and the primary cause of his inability to awaken was his lost memory. This presented Thea with a dilemma. Memory was a complex subject, and she had no definitive solution. It was similar to how she had erased Steve's memory. Once erased, it was gone, never to be recovered. A memory existed, and it didn't. Even her profound magical powers couldn't conjure a memory out of thin air. I'm sorry. I don't have any good solution. Shadow knew about her supernatural abilities when they were on Purgatory Island. Now that she heard that she had no solution, a trace of sadness unconsciously appeared in the corners of her eyes. Are you planning to stay in the United States or return home? Yao Fei was completely insignificant in Xia's eyes, but Shadow, this poor woman, was still worthy of sympathy. My father read a statement on Purgatory Island that day. We can't go back, and the medical care here is more advanced, Shadow answered quickly. It can be seen that she has thought about this question many times, and her answer is organized and not hasty. The medical care here is advanced. Xia was a little dissatisfied. If you wait a few more years, aliens with special abilities will emerge. Each of them is a walking nuclear bomb. The casualties among the civilians are so high. How can the medical care be undeveloped? But there was no need to elaborate on this with Shadow. Then come back to Star City with me. Gotham is too chaotic. Thea had reasons to say this. Barbara had just recovered, and Talia was seriously injured. Although the Joker was imprisoned by Batman again, Batman's anger always had to be vented somewhere, and the criminals in Gotham were the best targets. Although Gotham is made up of ordinary people, a fight can also create a grand scene of Mars hitting the Earth. It's better not to let Shadow see such a fiery scene. Relatively speaking, Star City without the return of Green Arrow is much safer. Some people say that superheroes are the source of chaos. This is a bit arbitrary. But it can't be said to be completely wrong. If Gotham didn't have Batman, it might form another deformed balance, and ordinary people wouldn't have to write a will and say goodbye to their families before going out to buy groceries. Now that there is no Flash in Central City and no Green Arrow in Star City, looking at the positive and optimistic spirit of the citizens, this point can be effectively proved. Chapter 258 Xia's Little Black Book. Excuse me, what kind of job can you do? Thea couldn't tell if the beautiful girl was still a student or had worked before. She looked quiet and well-mannered. Could she have dropped out of school early like Oliver? I was studying forensics, but I didn't graduate. Shadow now had some understanding of Gotham's security situation. What kind of capitalist, international metropolis? Nonsense. It was too chaotic here. It was a blessing that Shadow was skilled, otherwise she'd be dead, alone with her vegetative father. Forensics? It seemed like a pretty high-end profession. Thea took it all in, saying, leave it to her. With her current connections with the Star City Police Department, she could even get a connection and do nothing without getting gossiped about. She told Shadow to pack and set off for Star City. Along the way, Thea spoke to both the Star City detective and Inspector Lance. The new detective, whose cooperation with the police and the public was now increasingly close, didn't even ask about the visitor's major or expertise, or even whether he was a man or a woman, and simply agreed. Detective Lance had a few complaints about her shoving people in, but he didn't interfere too much. He helped Shadow find housing. The Quinn group had aggressively acquired land in the slums during the reigns of Robert Sr. and Moira. Although Thea had been diligently working to reduce housing prices across Star City by 20%, she still had a significant amount of property on hand. Knowing that Shadow was proud and reluctant to accept too much help, she found her a small apartment, more than enough for both father and daughter. He told her to keep him informed, but Thea felt her whereabouts were erratic, and she wouldn't be surprised if she were ever off-world. She also gave Shadow Felicity's phone number, saying she was someone she could trust and that she could contact her when she wasn't around. After a busy day, feeling she'd done her homework, Thea flew back to the Quinn mansion to discuss collaborating with Moira on a major story involving Batman. Everything proceeded smoothly. Privately, several high-ranking government officials scoffed at the Quinn group's actions, though they clearly didn't harm anyone's interests. They promptly accepted the money, but when asked about the details, they neither nodded nor shook their heads. A senator named Hammond was particularly abusive. He accepted the Quinn group's money, offering no kind words. He railed against Thea, using historical references to current events. Finally, with a look of concern for a mentally retarded child, he warned Thea to stay grounded and avoid unrealistic ambitions. "I'm going to kill him," Moira kept holding Thea at the table, fearing she'd slapped a brazen senator to death. "I'm so pissed," Thea muttered all the way home, repeatedly considering sending the court's claws to bring the idiot before her and give him a good beating, but ultimately gave up after Moira's pleading. After calming down, Thea couldn't help but admire Superman's good temper. The ugly faces of those in power, even an earthling like her, were ready to kill him, yet a powerful alien like him could endure it. His fortitude was truly remarkable. But calm as she was, she had no intention of letting her grandson go. She had already stabbed Ares to death, so how could she fear a senator with nothing to show for it? She dared to take action even if Washington displeased her. But something had happened to the other side just after their meeting, and anyone could have contacted her. Thea planned to wait a month, until things calmed down, before killing him. She wrote the man's name on the first page of her little black book, Senator Hammond of Seaside City, and wrote the date beside it. "Don't do it now," Moira observed her recording. Such a solemn note on the first page certainly wasn't a gesture of gratitude. She knew Thea's current abilities, and she wasn't one for mercy. She checked to see if anyone was around, and whispered to Thea. "Understood. He has another month to live." The mother and daughter smiled, but the identity of this he was self-evident. Time flew by, a week whizzing by. Batman and Thea agreed to discuss the address, then arrived in the middle of the night in his Batplane. "This city is so peaceful," Damian, sitting in the co-pilot seat, insisted, for some reason, to come along. Batman, wanting to spend more time with his son, hesitated before agreeing, thinking of the lack of fighting in Star City. Now, facing his son's question, he didn't know how to respond. There wasn't much fighting here, let alone fighting. There was no harm without comparison. Compared to Gotham, where the night was filled with a roar of submachine guns, Star City seemed peaceful and almost heavenly. Was the difference really that great? Star City had a population of several million, but it was truly peaceful. Although Batman had only gotten a bird's-eye view from the air, there were no robberies or murders. Without criminals, there was no need for superheroes, right? They soon arrived at Thea and Felicity's secret base. Upon meeting, Batman eagerly asked, "Your city is truly amazing. What's the secret?" When Thea understood his question, she was speechless. "What's the secret? The major gangs are all under Malcolm's control, leaving the few scattered ones completely powerless. The remaining unemployed have been re-employed, with the more active ones reassigned to other cities. After a hard day's work, they retire early. Even if the smaller gangs wanted fresh blood, they couldn't find any. Several factors have contributed to Star City's current peace and stability. Moira's rise to power has been highly effective, her influence spreading to surrounding cities. In just 6 months, Star City has gained hundreds of thousands of residents, all relocated from nearby cities rescued by superheroes. It's just our small city." "Small cities are like that," Thea replied sheepishly. Batman had brought Damien and Barbara, whom everyone had met. Thea primarily introduced Felicity to the mischievous child. Upon learning that it was Batman's son, Felicity, who had a good relationship with Catwoman, couldn't help but worry for her friend. "This kid's already grown up. Can you still win over him?" Thea led them to a private room. The moment they entered the room, they all covered their noses. "What a strong smell of blood, that's right. This is a secret technique developed by the ancient Egyptian pharaohs for immortality. It's called the blood pool. It takes a while to work, but there are no side effects, making it perfect for Talia's recovery, Thea explained to Batman, pointing to the large, square pool before them. Talia will absorb the essence of this blood to slowly repair her injuries. An optimistic estimate is that it will take about a month. If you have no questions, let's get started. When a doctor asks a patient if they have any questions, the subtext is that they don't want to waste any more time talking to you. Hurry and pay the bill to get hospitalized. Chapter 259 Depressed Lucius. In ancient times, the healing process of a blood pool would have been considered a scourge of heaven and man. But in modern times, many conditions have become far more convenient. There's no need to massacre entire villages to collect blood. Hospital blood banks have plenty of fresh blood, and if you pay, even the unemployed are eager to donate. Blood coagulates quickly, so the ancients resorted to burning wood, a laborious and costly solution, to keep the blood warm. Modern times, this isn't so cumbersome. Several coils of resistance wire are wrapped around the pool, and a current is applied when needed to maintain heat. Take off her clothes and put her in the pool. Thea took the temperature, finding it suitable. She motioned Batman to stop slouching and bring her in quickly. Batman was a little stunned. He usually directed others, driving them around in circles. Now, being bossed around for once, he felt a little uncomfortable. He glanced around at the room full of women, and Damien was still a child. It seemed he was the only one who could do this. Knowing these opportunities wouldn't come often, Thea directed Batman here and there. Are these Egyptian hieroglyphics? Batman lowered Talia into the pool and began to examine the patterns Thea had carved into the walls. Yes, it's not quite right to call this a spell, it's more like a ritual. Thea continued to add magical power to the writing on the walls. When the walls were fully illuminated, the blood in the pool began to slowly flow, forming a vortex. The center of the vortex was the unconscious Talia. Thea walked to the side and powered the pool. Maintain this temperature. The blood will promote our healing process. I'll replace the pool in 3 days. Will you stay here? I'll go back to Gotham first and come back in 3 days. Batman observed Thea's treatment method, which blended ancient rituals, medieval magic, and modern technology. He found it incongruous, but Talia's demeanor was indeed much more relaxed. He felt relieved, leaving Barbara and Damien behind and returning to Gotham alone. Bruce, I don't know if I'm old and deaf, but you're asking me to build a temple in Turkey in your and Wayne Enterprises name. Lucius Fox, a black man with a dazed look on his face and a wide-open mouth, asked Bruce Wayne, who sat in his office, in confusion. You understand correctly, old man. Bruce's face twitched as he emerged from his batsuit into Wayne Enterprises, but as a man of his word, he dutifully carried out his promise. Thea had been treating Talia for a week, and he could see with his own equipment that she was gradually recovering. Thea and her family had exchanged a few words when Talia woke up 2 days ago. He owed her too much, and even if he had been trying to just give her a once-over, he now had to treat it as his own business. Thea had already established connections in Turkey, and several Turkish dignitaries were beaming with joy after receiving the hefty rewards. They were eager to see more of this kind of demolition of national landmarks to enrich themselves. The Prime Minister, still somewhat patriotic, acquiesced to their actions after receiving promises that no troops would be stationed or secret bases would be built. In short, you can publicize it all you want, but our government won't see or hear it, and anything you do has nothing to do with us. The local government will handle it. And the only thing left to do is convince the US government to take charge, with Bruce as a target. Even Batman, with his earth-beating intellect, could imagine the criticism he would face if he stepped forward, but seeing Barbara, now able to run and jump, Gordon, with a smile on his face, and the mother and son who spent their days in Star City, he figured it was nothing. It's just a sacrifice of pride. We have plenty. Determined, Batman immediately changed into a suit and went to Wayne Enterprises to discuss the details of the matter with his old buddy, Lucius Fox. Is there a new energy source buried under that area? The old black man asked in a low voice. No, Bruce Wayne shook his head. It's just a rocky field. Unless the rock itself can generate electricity, there's no way it could be a source of energy there. So, some kind of world-destroying weapon? An ancient weapon or something? The old black man, thinking of his hidden profession, automatically imagined a lot of things. Sorry, I've checked with 3 different radiation sources and 2 different spectra, and there's nothing there. Bruce's forehead was almost furious. Do you think he hasn't thought about it? He'd tested every technological tool on Earth, and it was just a wasteland, with only a few tens of thousands of tourists each year. The old black man scratched his head. This isn't it, that isn't it. You're coming to my office so early this morning to have fun. Even if you're the boss, I'd still scold you. Bruce could see his displeasure. Talia and the old black man had a very bad relationship before, so he had kept Talia and her son hidden and only explained the experience of Gordon and his daughter. Lucius knew about Gordon's experience, and although he was happy to know his daughter was safe, he was still a little upset that the promise Gordon had made would come full circle and fall on his head. But he knew the importance of the matter. If Gordon came forward, his reputation would be half ruined. It would have been much better if Wayne Enterprises had stepped in. It's the principle of sharing the damage. What would be fatal to one person would be no more than a hair loss to 10,000. He glanced at Bruce with a sullen expression. You're really giving me a hard time. I'll make this happen. After sending Bruce Wayne, who had come to cause trouble so early in the morning, away, the old black man urgently convened a board meeting. Bruce had been barred from the board due to resistance from various parties, and his shares were held on his behalf by the old black man, making him eligible. The outcome of the meeting was neither joyous nor depressing. Thea controlled over half of Wayne Enterprises' 20-plus directors, either overtly or covertly, and had instructed them long ago to neither support nor oppose the proposal. The old black man had expected fierce opposition when he presented his proposal, but he discovered that most abstained, and the proposal ultimately passed with a remarkably low vote. Since it had passed, he had no choice but to accept the reality and began lobbying tirelessly on behalf of Bruce and Wayne Enterprises. The government's efficiency was consistently slow, so the old black man met with several elite members of the group's publicity department to discuss the next steps. Several elites were perplexed by this behavior, which had nothing to do with their own business. But they had to admit that the European and American spirit of contract was worth promoting. They didn't waste any time talking, simply taking your salary to come up with a plan for you. They offered suggestions for everything from promoting a temple to promoting Mars. And, as they say, strength lies in numbers, and when everyone adds fuel to the fire, the flames rise high. They ultimately developed a somewhat radical, but indeed effective, promotional strategy. Chapter 260, The Prelude to Big News. Spread the word we are going to launch all 8 wonders? And then say we're going to cancel 7 and only launch 1. When Bruce returned to the mansion after another night of fighting criminals, Lucius handed him this piece of collective wisdom. With his savvy in psychology, he understood the wisdom behind it. The plan was a sound one, with a high probability of success. But, the buzz on the first day will be enormous, the old black man said, his heart pounding. Fearing repercussions, he had already arranged for 3 bulletproof cars and hired 8 bodyguards. He was prepared for a backlash if the news spread. Unlike the old butler, Alfred, and old Gordon, who had served in the military in their youth, Alfred being a British Special Forces trooper. The old black man was old, and had been an intellectual in his youth. What if he ran into some hot-blooded young men trying to beat him up? It was always better to be cautious. He wanted to live longer. This scope is too large. Let's modify it. We can't touch that unspeakable country or Egypt. Bruce pondered and proposed an improved plan. His vision far surpassed that of a few laborers, and wasn't limited to the present. A narrow definition of repairing damaged ancient buildings might be acceptable, but you're also tearing down the ones that are still intact? What are you thinking? Will foreign leaders interpret this as the U.S. establishing a new hegemony? Are all these demolition and reconstruction attempts just testing the waters? Wanting the U.S. to become a true United States? That's a dream. No question about it. Fight till dawn. World War III starts with 100 nuclear bombs. The old black man, frightened by the scenario he described, broke into cold sweat. He resolved to send the elite who offered this suggestion back to the cleaning department. No one's pleas would help. Out of a sense of social responsibility and concerned about the loss of traditional culture, our group is tearing down and rebuilding these world-class buildings on their original sites. Thank you. The next day, the old black man, Lucius, gathered all the media he could find and, before everyone's sleepy eyes, announced this shocking news. He then quickly fled. Huh? Did you hear that? What are Wayne Enterprises going to do? It seems they're rebuilding something. Let me listen to your recorder. After Lucius left, A strange atmosphere descended upon the press conference. Reporters were trying to get information from one another, initially whispering among themselves before finally converging into a single voice. Holy crap, Wayne Enterprises was about to make a big announcement. When the media first revealed Bruce Wayne's feat, the public was skeptical. The 8 wonders of the world had stood for so many years, who would rebuild them? Isn't that insane? Everyone thought it was just some Gotham playboy with nothing better to do, a ridiculous act to attract attention. But as Wayne Enterprises continued to hold press conferences, one day surveying the land, the next day soliciting designers for ancient buildings from around the world, everyone realized Bruce Wayne was serious this time. This incident sparked a massive uproar, sparking heated debate across society. For the relatively young, uninformed generation, this move felt like a tactical coup, a move that ripped apart the history and culture of a nation, dragging everyone down to the same level. Many rebellious young men, deeply imbued with liberal democracy, shouted their support for Bruce Wayne before the cameras of major media outlets. He was their idol. Amidst this blind adulation, several Wayne Enterprises high-tech products practically sold out, leading to a slight rise in the company's stock price. Most American politicians dismissed the matter as irrelevant, offering neither support nor opposition. Even a few individuals who had received funding from the Quinn Group expressed their support. The military, mired in Iraq, expressed delight at Wayne Enterprises' ability to divert global media attention. A general named Ryan even publicly voiced his support. While the domestic reaction was lukewarm, the international scene was much more intense. The British, sharing a traditional kinship with the United States and facing each other across the sea, unanimously believed this was yet another attempt by the Americans to abandon their traditions and forget their roots. The Conservative Prime Minister, in a televised address, singled out Bruce Wayne for 15 minutes. Even Amanda Waller, who was training Oliver as an agent in Hong Kong, was alarmed. She had just sent her men to retrieve Harley Quinn, but she actually wanted the Joker more, but Batman was adamant. He'd negotiate anything else, but he wouldn't give her the Joker. This nearly brought a falling out between the two. Amanda was deeply upset, having hoped Batman would be quiet for a few days, but the news left her speechless. Her first reaction was that Batman was crazy, not just in the guise of crazy, but truly insane. But after gathering information from all sources, they discovered he was perfectly normal, having done nothing antisocial or anti-human. It doesn't make sense. How could Bruce do such a thing? Is he suffering from a split personality? He instructed his men to investigate. After a thorough investigation, Amanda reviewed all the information behind this incident. She didn't believe Batman, with nothing better to do than to have fun with the world, was so bored. The AOM's intelligence network was lavishly built, and as the leadership attempted to curb Steve Trevor's power, Amanda Waller's resources were increasingly concentrated. A dedicated intelligence team, after a day of hard work, finally delivered the results to Amanda's desk. Was the Quinn Group initially behind this? Amanda, constantly embroiled in conspiracy, automatically thought of Oliver Queen, whom she controlled. Could the two events be connected? After much reflection, she concluded that none were true. She had discovered Oliver Queen by accident, and the Quinn family likely hadn't known he was still alive. So, was this being driven by Thea Quinn, Batman's close personal acquaintance? Amanda hadn't slept all night, and still couldn't figure out the purpose for building the temple. And how could Batman, so rebellious, be the scapegoat? There had to be more to this story than she knew. She kept investigating. This time, the investigation proved difficult. After a frantic 2 weeks of fussing and struggling, the team finally managed to capture footage of Thea shopping with several other women. A sharp-eyed agent spotted the red-haired Barbara and connected the dots. Parasite Barbara Gordon was cured? How? Amanda, still unsatisfied with the results, questioned her subordinates with a stern look. They evaded one another, stating they had no idea. Barbara was either in Star City or Gotham. They couldn't just kidnap her, forcefully force a fistful of truth serum into her, and then ask her how she recovered. First, Barbara's skills were impressive. They wouldn't be able to capture her without a standard combat team. Furthermore, they were government employees, not gang members. They'd given up their lucrative salaries to work for the government because they felt a sense of justice. They wouldn't resort to drastic measures against a fellow righteous hero. Chapter 261 Laurel's Unexpected Discovery. Amanda felt her subordinates were inadequate. She needed men who'd obey orders, not these patriotic young men. The idea of organizing a team to do anything, even if it meant doing something the eye of heaven couldn't. No, it wasn't the right time yet. Amanda felt a few criminals currently in custody weren't enough to garner government support. She needed pressure from a powerful figure to ensure they wouldn't rebel. Everything needed to be considered carefully. Although she had no hope for the outcome, Amanda instructed her men to investigate as diligently as possible. Talia's injuries were slowly recovering, but she saw improvement every day. Barbara, nominally her caretaker, naturally had more free time. She spent her days at Thea's secret base, tutoring Felicity in computer science in her spare time. She was beginning to show a talent for computers, and her life was comfortable. Thinking back to the gunfire of Gotham, this place felt like another world. The girls were growing tired of staying indoors, so Thea suggested they go shopping. Feeling it wasn't lively enough without a crowd, they called in Shadow, who had already successfully entered the Star City Police Department, and Laurel Lance, whose law firm was on the verge of bankruptcy. Shadow was working for a job, and Detective Lance was initially unhappy with Thea's casual introduction of people to the police station, but after seeing how gentle she was, he completely fell silent. Laurel had come to the police station to see Detective Lance several times, and through this, they had become acquainted with Shadow. As someone who knew everyone, Thea introduced the women to each other. Actually, everyone in Star City knew each other, but she mainly introduced Barbara Gordon from Gotham. "They're having a great time chatting," Felicity said, holding a large Coke as she walked behind Thea and Shadow. Her eyes kept glancing at Barbara and Laurel walking ahead. They had clearly just met, so why did they get along so well? The beautiful Shadow nodded. Her relationship with Laurel had been lukewarm. She had always assumed Laurel was aloof, but today, that wasn't the case at all. Thea could only chuckle, saying she had no idea. Who could have known Barbara and Laurel would get along so well? Their personalities were quite similar, though, both American women with a strong sense of justice, cheerful, optimistic, and idealistic. They weren't like Felicity, who stood over a meter tall, with a criminal record, or the scheming Thea, and Shadow was even more foreign. Barbara and Laurel's shared upbringing gave them a strikingly similar outlook. The two women initially chatted with the other three, but later, when they discussed their own backgrounds, they discovered they had nearly identical origins, divorced families, both raised under the wing of upright sheriff fathers. This implicit sense of identity gave them even more common ground. Thea felt that if it weren't for the time period, the two would have been beheaded and married like sisters. "It seems like someone's watching us," Shadow whispered to Thea. Thea waved her hand, dismissing the idea. The only person following Laurel like a stalker in Star City was her other brother, Tommy. However, Thea still had a slightly different view of Shadow's acumen. As an archer, keen intuition was essential. Yadofei's initial training of his daughter was truly commendable. "You all have great figures." The girls spent the day strolling around, without encountering robbery or murder. Such a smooth shopping trip was truly a luxury for Barbara. They shipped their purchases back to their respective homes. Felicity suggested Pilates. In the dressing room, Laurel observed the girls' figures and touched her belly, feeling a sigh of relief. Thea, Barbara, and Shadow all underwent extensive training. While their figures weren't noticeable on a regular basis, the difference between them and ordinary people like Laurel was immediately apparent once they changed clothes. Thea's muscles, after divine transformation, were more normal, while Shadow and Barbara had developed significant muscle groups. "That's why we're here to exercise," Felicity quickly changed the subject, noting Laurel's confusion, stretching her arms and legs to indicate that she was just another person. Seeing Felicity's average figure, Laurel finally came to her senses. If 4 of the 5 women were all toned, she'd despair of the world, but that ratio was still a bit high. Taking advantage of a break from exercising, Barbara whispered to Thea, "Doesn't Laurel know about you?" "I don't know, but I think she's a little suspicious." "You know her father is a cop?" Thea noticed from the corner of her eye that Laurel wasn't completely reassured. "But she's a really nice person, and she's got good physique. With a little training, she'll be a righteous hero again." It was clear that Barbara was very optimistic about Laurel, and she seemed to be immediately considering introducing her to the team. Thea was speechless. The friendship between these two had blossomed so quickly. Was it true that they were the founders of the Birds of Prey? They'd only just met this morning, hadn't they? She responded to Barbara as subtext, "If she doesn't object, I have no problem. It doesn't matter if you mention it or not, I'll have to observe her carefully," Barbara concluded cheerfully. As for the observation, it was probably just a formality. Thea had grown accustomed to the history she had altered. She'd already been hanging out with Diana, so how could a change be this big? As for whether Oliver might have a heart attack after returning to the city and discovering not only Shadow still alive, but also Tommy and Laurel possessing special abilities, Thea didn't care. Unfazed by the risk of being exposed, the group unleashed their full physical prowess, performing extreme moves that stunned their Pilates instructors. After their workout, they each went home. Barbara, using the excuse of being unfamiliar with the streets of Star City, joined Laurel. "Why are you all so fit? Those moves just now aren't something an ordinary person could do." Laurel, also feeling a strong affinity with Barbara, asked directly, unconcerned that it was only their first day together. "You know my father is Jim Gordon, but you don't know my other identity. I am Batgirl," Barbara said as she took out a long whip, pointed at a tree trunk not far away, and exerted force. With one whip, she broke a branch as thick as her arm, and then with a clever wrist strength, she rolled the broken branch back. Barbara stared at Laurel with a sharp gaze. "Now that you know my identity, do you have anything to say?" If Laurel showed fear and contempt, she would be very disappointed. But the future Black Canary did not let her down. "Superhero? You are Batman's companion? Oh my God," Laurel covered her mouth in surprise and said in disbelief. But she soon realized another problem. "Thea too? I have known her for many years." Chapter 262 The Prototype of the Birds of Prey. Barbara smiled. She and today's Felicity are both superheroes, of course. They might seem a little unreliable, but Thea is as great a city protector as Batman. Having recovered from her injuries, Barbara no longer had any desire to compete with Thea for who was stronger. When they were close, they could still compete, but now that the gap had widened, she had become more composed. She was especially impressed by the stability and unity of Star City. Batman has researched her past. She probably started to make a name for herself 2 years ago, right around the time her brother and father passed away. "Hey? Laurel. Why does that name sound so familiar? You're the woman her brother dated, right?" Barbara said, realizing how small the world was. When Batman was collecting information about Thea, she had compiled the information about Laurel Oliver. It took until now to reconcile the photos and the real person. Really? So she's been quietly protecting the city ever since then. Star City is indeed much safer now than it was 2 years ago, Laurel compared the past and present, and indeed, there had been a period when Thea had been elusive. Could she have been away fighting crime? Their perspectives limited their understanding. They didn't know how to resolve conflict, simply fighting violence with violence, believing all crime could be solved with their fists. Laurel lands, the more forces of justice, the better. "Would you like to join us?" "Of course I do, but I don't have the strength." Laurel felt she couldn't master the whip-wielding technique herself. Barbara thought for a moment, and it seemed Thea was neither for nor against it. So, she decided to train her herself. After being lectured like a grandson by Batman every day, it felt surprisingly good to now be able to lecture others. The next day, after a half-day shift at the group, Thea came to the secret base for an afternoon break and discovered a new member of her group. Laurel, sweating profusely and wearing a sports vest, was practicing boxing when she saw Thea enter and offered a sour teasing remark. Thea could only smile and nod. She honestly thought Laurel's training was pointless. Star City was unexpectedly quiet before Green Arrow's return. She'd rather spend her time building her law firm. But everyone has their own ambitions, and she couldn't say anything. Now, watching Barbara enthusiastically teach while Laurel studied diligently, Thea recalled her early days studying with Malcolm. She wondered where Malcolm had gone. It was a rare thing to find someone missing after searching for their roots. After watching their training for a few moments, Thea went over to Felicity and nudged her. "Aren't you going to practice?" "I'm not very athletic." Felicity felt depressed at the mention of this. She was a bit lazy, but she had once pestered Thea to teach her for a few days, but the results were disappointing. The girl's coordination was so poor that even simple movements would be distorted, and she eventually gave up. The two chatted for a while Thea went off to read a book. A few days ago, she had visited several Princeton University leaders, presenting them with a generous gift. Both sides were delighted, and a preliminary agreement had been reached on her plan: 6 months of undergraduate study, 1 year of master's, and 2 years of doctoral study. As long as her grades were valid, the university wouldn't prevent her from obtaining her degree. Instead, they would publicize it widely, a win-win for both sides. Now, Thea's memory, enhanced by divine power, had surpassed human limits. Even simple university courses in Europe and the United States were a breeze, and she had no doubt she would graduate on time. As a public figure, carrying the title of high school graduate every day was unflattering. A doctorate was much more impressive. Time flew by. Thea occasionally went out to exercise, while Felicity was absorbed in writing software for some indeterminate purpose. The only sound in the empty room was the relentless beating of Barbara beating Laurel. Pa. Stand up, Pa. Watch your feet, Pa. Too many holes. Laurel was bruised and swollen, and Thea watched with a smirk. It was obvious that this was Batman's standard training method for Robin and Barbara. It's simple and crude, without explaining all the fundamentals of fighting. Perhaps Americans are used to this kind of physical memorization method of learning. Thea was increasingly grateful that she had been taught by her own father. If she had been taught by more universal methods, she might not have been able to stick with it. As she pondered this, Barbara struck Laurel in the face with another stick. As Laurel stood up, blood dripped from her chin onto the ground. "Are you okay?" Barbara asked. Laurel shook her head, indicating she could still hold on. Seeing Thea watching from a distance, Barbara gestured for her to treat her nose first, then approached Thea with a stick in hand. "How long do you think it will take for Laurel to be ready for combat?" Barbara, exhausted, grabbed her bottle of water and guzzled it. Thea was speechless. "You're so impatient. You learned the truth yesterday, practiced all day, and you expect her to be ready for combat? Is there such a quick way to teach?" "Excuse me, she's still a long way from here, isn't she?" Thea wasn't afraid to speak frankly. After all, Laurel had connections with Oliver and Tommy. Sending her out to fight crime after just one day of training would be like sending her to her death, and Thea wouldn't agree. "You misunderstood me. I meant, do you have any support? Your Star City is so peaceful, like a paradise. I think Laurel needs some real combat experience. You want her to go to Gotham?" Will Batman agree? Batman's standards for his companions were incredibly demanding, and Thea really didn't think Laurel would pass. Barbara's expression darkened. "Dick left to become Nightwing. I need something to do, too. I've been thinking a lot since this injury. Dick was right about something. I'll never grow if I stay under Batman's wing for too long. I want to form my own team to fight crime." Was this the beginning of the Birds of Prey? Thea nodded. She could see that Nightwing still held a special place in Barbara's heart, but now she was listening to others' opinions and no longer the reckless, impulsive young woman she once was. That was progress, too. The fact that she turned to herself for help, rather than the more familiar Batman, indicated she had made up her mind to go it alone. As Laurel's friend, she was obliged to offer her assistance. As for Laurel's abilities, that was easy to solve. A sonic device, as per the original plot, would suffice. "You want her to quickly become combat ready?" "I don't think that's difficult," Thea said, briefly pondering the principles of a sonic collector. She knew she could definitely make one. "Have you noticed Laurel's voice? It's higher pitched than a normal human's. I could make her an audio amplifier that would emit ultrasonic waves to knock down enemies during combat." "Do you think that's feasible?" Thea said, taking out pen and paper and sketching a diagram for Barbara on the spot. Chapter 263, Damian's Mission. Barbara looked at Thea like she was a monster. "I just mentioned it casually, and you came up with a plan in just a few minutes." She looked at the sketch Thea had drawn for her. Although she didn't have Batman's extensive mechanical skills, she had at least received higher education. After a quick glance, she gave Thea a thumbs up. This little device wasn't difficult to make. As Laurel finished her day's training and prepared to go home, Thea handed her a necklace. "See this blue device? You can press it and speak for 5 minutes. The chip inside will record your voice, and from then on, this device can only be used by you. When you scream at full strength, the audio amplifier inside will emit your voice in a cone forward at a power of 10 times the original volume. That's basically it." Thea methodically explained the principle to Laurel. "This is for me? You mean I'm a superhero now?" Laurel almost jumped for joy. "You must complete your training, or I won't let you go on a mission, no matter what Barbara says." Laurel was deeply moved by Thea's words. Despite being bruised and battered, she hugged Thea tightly. "You're so nice to her. Is it because she's your brother's woman?" After Laurel went home to rest, Barbara came to chat with Thea, trying to get to know her new teammate. Maybe, Thea said, refusing to say much. Sometimes she envied girls like Barbara and Laurel, who had ideals and drive, who set their sights on a goal and persevered. Thea wasn't as open-minded. She had too many concerns and overthinking. She worked at full capacity every day, yet still felt like so much was undone, so many plans unfinished. 3 days after she'd helped Laurel make equipment, her office was blocked by a 6-year-old child. Miss Thea, this child, the female assistant outside the office felt her eyes blur as the child slipped in. She quickly ran after them to apologize. The Quinn group was now the dominant force in Star City, and if she was fired, she wouldn't be able to find a new job. It's okay, I know the kid, Thea said, waving her assistant away. She looked helplessly at Damian Wayne. Is your mother in trouble? As the secret base grew larger and larger, Thea found a comfortable room in the slum for Talia and her son to stay in, fearing it would affect her treatment. Talia had already recovered much of her fighting ability, and several of her men had arrived in Star City, so their safety was assured. Thea only hurried over to activate the blood pool's magic circle. She hadn't seen Damian, the naughty kid, for several days. I want to hire you, the kid's words startled Thea, and she felt a chuckle in her face, but Damian's serious expression made her realize he was serious, and she dropped her playful expression. What do you want to hire me for? My grandfather spent his life searching for traces of magic. I don't want to be ordinary. I want to learn magic from you, Damian said to Thea with unwavering seriousness, his eyes clear and untainted. Thea stood up and closed the door, carefully considering her words. Listen, Damian Wayne, are you saying this on your own terms? Not your grandfather or your parents, the child nodded solemnly. It seemed as if this brat could be exploited. They weren't even related, but Thea valued him for his usefulness. Damian's value was far greater than he gave himself credit for. But Thea still had a knack for keeping her word. She wouldn't lie to a child without words. She planned to test Damian's aptitude for learning magic. Without it, everything else was meaningless. Stand still, don't move. Let me see if you have an affinity for magic. Thea summoned a ball of light beside Damian's nervous face, examined it, and shook her head. Light wasn't present. She summoned earth, fire, water, and wind, one by one. Although Thea lacked earth and water attributes, she could still simulate them with her magical power. Of the 4 main elements, only earth showed a slight fluctuation, but not a strong one. When she finally summoned the dark element, she felt a distinct attraction to it. Thea removed her glasses. Boy, you're lucky. You have an affinity for the dark element and some sensitivity to the earth element. However, considering your age, your connection to the earth element will become weaker as you reach adulthood. You're clearly overachieving with one attribute, but not yet at the level of dual attributes. It's barely a decent aptitude, I guess. Damian breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this. He wasn't stupid. The 5 light balls hadn't reacted before, and he'd nearly given up hope. Fortunately, he'd finally proven himself to be not completely useless. Thea silently observed Damian, who clenched his fists. This kid had decent aptitude. Old Ma and Tommy couldn't sense even a trace of his magic. With the bloodlines of Batman and the Ninja Master, he clearly had more dark element in his body than any other element. Considering their personalities and lifestyles, this result was to be expected. Tell me, what kind of compensation can you offer? You don't think this is Hogwarts, where you can just pay to learn? Thea spoke slowly, slouching in her chair, not wanting to appear too proactive. I'll pay anything. It was clear the young Damian had thought this through many times, and his answer was resolute. After waiting for 10 minutes, just as Damian was wondering if Thea had fallen asleep, Thea slowly stood up and said, Power-hungry young man, I don't want your money, not even your life or soul. My reward is simple. Thea stared into Damian's eyes. I want the Ninja Master's. Damian's face tensed as he waited for her next words. I want the Ninja Master's sword. Damian was overcome with ecstasy by her heavy breathing. He had initially thought she was asking for the Master's life, but now, all she wanted was a sword? Your expression suggests you've seen it before? That's great. Give me the sword. I don't care what you do, steal, rob, or beg. Once I have it, I'll teach you magic. Thea dragged Damian, still dazed, out of the office. That's all I have to say. Go where you want to be. Without paying Damian any attention, she left. Damian, a man of few words, left Wayne Tower, initially believing the mission would be easy. But then, recalling his grandfather, The ninja master's attitude toward the sword and linking it to Thea's mission today, he knew the sword was truly extraordinary and impossible to obtain on his own. Finally, Damien made up his mind and returned to his residence to consult with Talia. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 264, Mother and son prepare to trick their father and grandfather. Damien recounted his entire meeting with Thea to Talia. While Talia felt her son was incredibly bold, daring to make a deal with someone like Thea, who was definitely not a kind person at just 6 years old, she was also proud of his talent for learning magic. Her injuries had been so severe that she thought her life was over, but thanks to Thea's meticulous treatment, she was now on the mend. This deeply impressed her with the wonders of magic and a clear understanding of the ninja master's 800 years of tireless effort collecting ancient secrets. The opportunity the master had been searching for 800 years was now destined for her son, and how could she not be delighted? But as his own daughter, she felt a most poignant realization: you never knew how many hidden cards he held. The Joker had dared to brazenly enter the room to rob people because he was insane, but there were only a few clowns left. Talia admitted she wasn't that strong. Thea's task sat squarely within their capabilities. Any harder and they'd be unable to complete it, while an easier one wouldn't be difficult either. This demanding task, demanding both brain power and energy, made Talia grit her teeth, but for her son's sake, she was determined to complete it. As for making a fake sword to get away with it, she didn't dare do that. Damien's training wasn't a one-time thing, he'd need to study with Thea for a long time. What if it was ever discovered to be a fake? Would Damien's life be in jeopardy? Neither mother nor son mentioned seeking Batman's help, as Damien felt his pride wouldn't allow him to seek too much help. Talia, aware of Batman and the ninja master's friendly demeanor, honestly felt that Batman wasn't as valued by the ninja master as her own daughter. When I recover from my injuries, let's go back to South Darbut together. Let's do this. Mother and son stayed up all night, constantly discussing their plan to betray their father and ancestors. Thea didn't care about their plans. As the saying goes, you can't guard against thieves in your own home, whether they got it on their own, with Batman's help, or even through persuasion. Thea focused on the results, not the process. With the transition from old to new, the group's affairs gradually got back on track, and naturally, as chairman, she had less to do. With the moon goddess's ability as a voter, she could sense any mention of her name at night in Star City. A few complaints would be fine, but those harboring resentment would be in trouble. The lucky ones would be transferred to other cities, like Metropolis or Gotham, where superheroes are more active. If they didn't seek death, they could live a few more years. As for those who said harsh words, the court's clause would be dispatched. Afterwards, they'd just have to file a missing persons report at the police station. What do you think of a good code name for Laurel? Barbara asked, catching Thea reading a book. The book looked thick, even with the text on the cover. Barbara didn't recognize a single word, but judging by the abstract illustrations between the pages, she knew it wasn't a book on natural science. Thea looked up from her complex magic book and saw Laurel listening intently. After some thought, she realized that even with her naming difficulties, she hadn't come up with anything catchy. She decided to stick with the original name. Remember when Inspector Lance gave you two girls the canary when you were little? And since the Bat family all wear black, you probably don't like anything fancy, right? How about Black Canary? Great name. You have a natural talent for naming, both girls agreed. Thea facepalmed. I have a natural talent for naming. Didn't you hear the elk hidden in the ring roaring? With a good name comes trouble. After 2 days of training, Laurel felt she had improved significantly and began asking Barbara for weapons and equipment. Barbara was preparing to strike out on her own, and it would be inappropriate for her to return to Batman for supplies. Fortunately, Thea, a wealthy and well-connected person, was available, and the task of crafting the equipment and weapons was once again assigned to her. Thea took a look at Laurel's skills and, frankly, they were quite lackluster. Although Thea's current targets were non-humans and she looked down on common criminals, at Laurel's current level, her first battle had an 80% chance of death. After all, they were her childhood friends, and with her two unfortunate brothers, she couldn't bear to see her get shot to death. Thea fashioned her a combat uniform inspired by Wayne Enterprises' Kevlar body armor. The uniform was all black and offered protection against handguns and sharp piercings. As for the weapons, Thea consulted the two men's opinions. It's unclear whether it was Laurel's own choice or Barbara's desire to create a female Robin to commemorate her lost love. Laurel also chose twin sticks. A month of sticks, a year of swords, and a lifetime of guns. This choice wasn't a bad one. Thea now understood the impatience of these two heroic women. Everything they chose was quick fix, the faster the better. Thea felt they could all learn from a female version of the Sunflower Manual. In the original story, Laurel seemed to have received a few days of instruction from Talia's sister, Nyssa. She casually wielded two sticks to accompany Green Arrow, and her lethality was atrocious. Other heroes who wield dual sticks did so out of a principle of non-killing and possessed exceptional martial arts skills. Laurel's was simply due to her lack of other weaponry. Given her overall physical fitness, learning Slade's Kali martial arts would be the most suitable option. Unfortunately, Thea didn't know the technique, and even if she did, she wouldn't have the patience to learn. Tried to feel these two short sticks, Thea beckoned Laurel to test the weapons. As she swung her weapon, she explained, two nickel chromium alloy rods, 80 centimeters long, can be combined into a long staff. Considering your limited lethality, I've added a discharge function to the metal rods. There's a button on the handle. Don't worry, it'll only stun you, not kill you. These naive people are so difficult to please, they have to constantly be mindful of not letting them go on a killing spree. Thea gifted Laurel accessories, armor, and weapons, completing her graduation gear, then left her alone, telling her to find a place to level up. If she died again, that would be her fate. The little cow that had accompanied her for 3 months would certainly not forget. The Quinn Group had placed an ad in the newspaper seeking experts in various civil engineering fields to build the maze, with no restrictions on experience or profession. Under normal circumstances, such an unconventional move would have been widely reported by the media. However, most of the attention was focused on Bruce Wayne's big news, and Thea's proposal hadn't garnered much attention. However, her unrestricted approach still attracted a large number of talented individuals to submit their proposals. Attracted by her generous offer, people came from all walks of life, professors, employees who considered themselves talented in architecture, military engineers, and even a small group of tomb raiders in the name of explorers. Amid the excited cries of the heifer, they chose the most complex project and immediately gave the go-ahead to begin construction. Chapter 265 Seaside City. The government said they'll formally submit their demands to Turkey in 3 days. Did the Quinn Group convince the government? No, I don't understand what's going on. I just feel like the government has suddenly become very proactive. Thea was currently video chatting with Batman. She was also puzzled by Batman's question. Everything was going according to plan, and it should have taken a month, but the government suddenly rushed through a ton of approvals. Thea thought Batman had mobilized his hidden connections. If it weren't for our relationship, the only ones who could push the government would be the military and the AOMCIE. I'll help you with some of it, but you have to be careful, Batman advised her, and the two quickly ended the call. To the average person, this matter was the Wayne Group's lead, with Thea's Quinn Group playing a supporting role. But the higher-ups all knew the specific leaders, and expecting them to selectively forget Thea was unrealistic. If only they could brainwash everyone, Thea thought idly, hands behind her head, long legs draped over the table. But it was unrealistic. Shaking her head, she discarded some unrealistic thoughts. Thea knew her recent rapid rise in strength had taken its toll on her. Magic was the first thing she thought of whenever she did something. This was unusual. The Constantine family possessed an abundance of dark magic. Thea decided to rest for a few days, soak up some sun, and regain her composure. But after only an hour on the terrace, she was interrupted. "Commander Leela, long time no see," Thea reluctantly said to Leela Michaels, dressed in black pants, and a secret agent's outfit. After all, they were acquaintances, and Leela's appearance spoke volumes. Thea realized it was likely the Sky Eyes were helping her clear government obstacles, but she had no business being polite. She could only listen to their requests. "Amanda wants to see you, Leela," now less youthful than before, her youthful demeanor gradually replaced by a steely, ruthless demeanor that strictly followed orders. After a few simple words, she stated her purpose. She was quite arrogant. Thea was irritated by the commanding tone that treated her like a subordinate, but she quickly suppressed her frustration. She was still a quasi-alliance with Amanda's faction, so there was no need to easily make enemies for a little fame. Since she hadn't decided what to do today, she decided to meet up with her. "Where are we meeting?" "Seaside City. Our plane is just down the road." Thea rolled her eyes. "Let's go." Star City was quite a distance from Seaside City. The AOC's plane took over an hour to reach this coastal city. On the way, Thea recalled that if it weren't for the name, this must be Green Lantern's hometown. After getting off the plane and sitting in the private car, Thea took in the scenery along the way. She was impressed by the intact buildings and the good spirits of the citizens. This indicated that Green Lantern hadn't appeared yet. Seaside City was similar in size to Star City. The two cities combined were not as big as Metropolis or Gotham. Both were relatively stable and peaceful places in first-tier cities. But Thea knew it was all just a facade. As soon as Green Lantern wore the ring, hardship would begin for the people here. As the Green Lantern Corps Earth Office, the residents of Coast City dreamed of a peaceful retirement. The lucky ones would have their homes and lives blown up in their sleep by the Red and Yellow Lantern Corps. The unlucky ones would be chased for 2 miles by aliens and then trampled to death. This wasn't alarmist, it was the lifestyle of Coast City for the next few years. Healthcare and funeral stock skyrocketed, while insurance, housing, and energy sectors plummeted. This vibrant lifestyle would continue until the arrival of the Dark Lord in Coast City. It wasn't a happy and stable life, but rather the entire city was wiped out by the Dark Lord, seemingly a miniature of the giant beast. "Huh? Miss Lila, are you married?" Thea, sitting in the back seat of the car, glanced at Lila's left hand. The gleaming ring on her ring finger signaled that the agent was already married. Lila raised her left hand and glanced at it, a happy smile automatically spreading across her face. "Yes, it's my comrade from Afghanistan." "Then I wish you the best." Thea feigned happiness for her. But if memory served, Lyra's first marriage to the black man, John Digger, was short-lived. Lyra was still on the rise in her career, while Digger, having left the barracks and entered the city, was having a miserable time. If it weren't for Oliver dragging the black man along to kill monsters every day, neither of them would have gotten married again. Talking about men is always the best way to bond between women. Thea avoided discussing her own affairs, always latching on to Lyra's topics. "Your husband must be very gentle. Your husband actually does housework?" "Oh my. It's a miracle." As they chatted, their relationship gradually warmed. While they weren't as close as they had been fighting side by side in Gotham, they were no longer as businesslike as they had been at the beginning. Just as the vehicle pulled up to an abandoned warehouse, 2 agents went to open the door. Unnoticed, Leela whispered in Thea's ear, "Amanda's noticed your psychic abilities. Be careful." Leela then assumed a serious demeanor, as if the words had nothing to do with her. "So that was the matter." Thea pretended not to hear, as she had been prepared for this. But Amanda's attitude was clearly growing. Was it because her hand was getting more and more cards, or because she felt she had control over Oliver? Should she teach her a lesson or a lesson? The choice was so difficult. Thea followed the others into the warehouse. Leela went through a series of identity verifications, including a pupil check, and finally, the metal gate of the AOLC secret base was revealed to Thea. "Is this your secret base?" Thea asked knowingly. How much taxpayer money were these guys wasting? That metal gate alone, 2.5 meters tall and half a meter thick, was worth more than all the equipment in their secret base combined. Should they rebuild a new one or modify the existing one? After seeing the Batcave and their base, Thea felt that the one back in Star City was too shabby. "This is Coastal City Base number 3, Lyra explained calmly. Thea opened her mouth slightly. What did that mean? This luxurious, yet only ranked 3rd? Did that mean there were at least 2 more in Coastal City? Just as she was calculating the cost of these bases, she heard a muffled boom from within the base. The vibration was so intense that even they could feel it from the doorway. "Something's happening." Lyra and the 2 agents rushed in, pistols drawn. Chapter 266. A friendly meeting in Seaside City. Thea followed them inside at a leisurely pace, her pace slow, but perfectly in line with the others' running pace. She wanted to use the Eye of Horus to peer inside, but she had no idea what the interior of the AOM was made of. The walls, furnishings, and metal doors obstructed her view. The AOM lived up to its reputation. This anti-see-through technology was truly advanced. It must have been prepared for Superman and Martian Manhunter, and of course, for people like her who might take a peek, Thea thought agonizingly. But she couldn't be sure what Amanda was doing. The constant sounds of gunfire and cries for help told her the situation wasn't looking good. As Thea walked, she wondered if she'd been wrong. Was Amanda not trying to threaten her, but simply playing the victim? Was she deliberately staging a scene to elicit her sympathy? Less than 10 minutes after following Lyra, they arrived at a vast, empty space. Before Thea could even take in the surroundings, she heard a violent shout. "You ain't in the way, die!" The voice was hoarse and weak, like the scraping of metal. Thea felt an invisible wave bearing down on her. Also, Thea extended her left hand, attempting to neutralize the wave. But halfway through her magic, she knew she had miscalculated. The opponent wasn't using magic, but rather some strange form of telekinesis. Telekinesis is a form of mental power. If it were simply telekinesis, her high-level magic could easily stop it. But the strange aura of the opponent's telekinesis bypassed Thea's magical barrier, crashing down on the group like a wave. For a tenth of a second, Thea sensed the opponent's telekinesis. It wasn't strong. With her physical strength, the wave was no different from a breeze. But she could withstand it, but the others couldn't. At the critical moment, Thea cast an air shield around Layla, mitigating half of the impact. At least she knew her, so she helped if she could. As for the other two agents, she could only say they were unlucky. As if they'd rehearsed, the two unfortunate agents simultaneously spat out a mouthful of blood and fell headfirst to the ground, kicking their legs and feet a few times before they were no longer moving. Leela, who had been helped by Thea, fared much better. Facing the wind-shielded Leela with telekinetic power, she chose not to retreat, charging headfirst into her. The intense impact sent her reeling back 3 steps, a trickle of blood trickling from the corner of her mouth and sparks flashing before her eyes, but she was safe. But no one was paying attention to her now, and the enemy's gaze passed over her to find Thea. Having skipped work today to get more sun, she dressed coolly, her long hair pulled back into a ponytail. She wore a plaid top knotted just below her chest, revealing her smooth, defined abs and navel. She wore shorts, a wide belt, and canvas shoes. To conceal her interspatial ring and make it appear less out of place, she also carried a crossbody bag slung over her shoulder. The bag contained only a few daily necessities. The tense atmosphere in the room was largely dampened by her street shopping attire. Her oblivious gaze on the surroundings intensified the pressure on the group. She saw first glance at the attacker, and the sight made her take a step back. It wasn't because the enemy was imposing, or had an inherent aura of repelling enemies, but because he was so ugly. Xia's reaction to the toad wasn't pure reflex. Not because of its power, but because it was disgusting. The figure before her had limbs and a torso, recognizing a humanoid form. However, the original human form had been squeezed together, making it unrecognizable. His clothes were stained, and he was covered in blood and mud. But the most striking thing about his forehead was its upward bulge, stretching it by a quarter. The upward portion stretched the entire length of his head, and the forward portion was the most exaggerated, like a bowl tucked over his head. The veins in his forehead weren't flowing with blood, but rather a yellow substance. Thea took a quick glance and didn't want to look any more. On the one hand, she felt a little disgusted, and on the other hand, she had already remembered. Wasn't this guy the little boss in Green Lantern? His mutated telekinesis seemed as weak as a baby in Thea's eyes. It was just a weak chicken and not worth mentioning. Thea's mental power attainment was far higher than his. She simulated his mental power fluctuations like a drop of water in the ocean. Although the toad could see her with his eyes, no matter how he used it, the telekinesis that he used to think was invincible seemed to have not seen Thea at all, and passed by her very naturally. The toad didn't believe in evil and controlled some metal objects to move towards Thea, but a magical thing happened. Whenever the telekinesis approached Thea, it automatically bypassed her. In the end, the toad was completely dumbfounded. He was a little confused about whether the woman in front of him was a human or a ghost. Thea ignored him and walked to the platform in the center of the room. She had thought the man looked familiar from the side, and now she finally saw him face to face. Haha, isn't this the most distinguished senator of our great America? I remember your name, what was it? Thea pulled a small black notebook from her bag and excitedly turned to the first page. Yes. That's right, Senator Hammond of Seaside City. Your Excellency, do you still remember me? Thea smiled with joy. She had originally planned to settle accounts with this guy, But she hadn't expected him to die in less than a month. Remember, save me, save me. I promised you everything you asked me to do. I still have money, I'll pay you, save me. The white-haired senator, tied to the platform, now saw Thea and desperately begged for help without caring about his dignity. Remember me? Then what's my name? Do you remember? Thea asked jokingly. The white-haired senator's face paled instantly, and he stammered, your name is Quinn. Fine, I remember my last name, but I'm afraid you, your honorable lord, are too lazy to remember your name. Hey, you dazed fellow over there, keep playing. Thea was completely fed up with the pretentious guy. She saw the toad staring at the white-haired senator. Huh? You two have a grudge, don't you? I remember you two were father and son. You're such a weirdo family. Keep going, Commander Amanda, I heard you were looking for me. Thea searched around until she finally found Amanda Waller on the ceiling. The Iron Commander's current image was far from good, her entire body splayed against the reinforced glass. Thea flew up into the air to speak to her, but her face was pressed against the glass by telekinesis. She could only fly halfway around to the other side, pretending to listen seriously. Chapter 267 I'm in a hurry, urgent. It's okay to express dissatisfaction appropriately, but excessiveness is always a problem. Thea released Amanda's telekinetic control and used a ball of magic to lift her down to the ground. Judging by Amanda's high heels and short skirt, she'd once been an elite special forces soldier in her youth, but after years of administrative work, it was hard to say how much of her previous skills remained. It was over 5 meters above the ground, and Thea was worried she might sprain her ankle and have to spend time treating her. But Amanda didn't appreciate it at all. She pointed with her chin at the toad not far away, slicing Senator Hammond with a knife, and asked, can you handle this guy? Thea looked at him and said, I need some time, then she stopped moving. The toad seemed insurmountable to ordinary people, but to her, it was no more difficult to deal with than someone like Harley Quinn. As the saying goes, it was a different level. But she didn't immediately rush over to knock the toad unconscious and take him away. She waited. She waited for Senator Hammond to die. Watching the toad slash his father left and right, Thea felt a sense of satisfaction. It also served to intimidate Amanda. She should avoid playing with fire. No one is more foolish than the other. Seeing that she didn't move, Amanda thought about the previous conversation between Thea and Senator Hammond. Their last encounter must not have been positive. But luck was on her side. Fortunately, Thea had called Thea here today. Otherwise, if the toad had unleashed its might, Amanda might have lost her life. The feeling of helplessness was even more profound amidst Senator Hammond's screams. After waiting for 3 minutes, Thea glanced over. Great. The senator was dead. It was time for her to finish the job. Although the guy's telekinesis was crude, Thea couldn't control him mentally, so she had to resort to physical means. Not wanting to reveal the existence of the special ring, she sought a weapon within the room and quickly defeated the toad. Is it okay if I kill this guy? Thea whispered to Amanda. If you can capture him alive, it's best. This guy has strong mental power. Even if I knock him out, do you have any means of controlling him? Amanda felt she had a chance to save some face. The depth of the Sky Eye Society is beyond your imagination. Thea nodded, saying nothing. She had just noticed Amanda had some sort of anti-mind control device. After all, this wasn't 1918. Human science and technology were advancing daily, especially in this world of advanced technology. Small tricks to control mental power were not uncommon. The toad didn't give up on controlling her mind. He practiced it like a Kigan practitioner, continuously channeling his energy. Waves of telekinesis surged, but were dispelled by Thea's gentle breeze. Hey? That's a good thing. Thea picked up a long rope from the ground. She had learned lassoing from Diana on Paradise Island and practiced more in the small village when she had nothing to do. While not as skilled as Diana, it was easy enough to deal with a handicapped toad before her. The toad didn't even try to dodge the lasso aimed at his neck, or rather, he tried to dodge but couldn't. Thea lassoed his thick neck and yanked him off the ground like a carrot. With a half-turn of her arm, she slammed him against the wall with a loud bang. The walls of the Sky Eye Society were so thick that the toad's weight of over 200 pounds didn't even tremble. Disgusting, Thea said, looking at the yellow pus on the wall. She felt a little nauseous. This guy was the natural enemy of female heroes. To punish him for his disgusting appearance and the unsightly appearance, she swung her arm, wrapped the rope around his neck, and repeatedly slammed him against the wall. For the first 2 times, she could still hear the toad's powerful shouts, but after his 5th close contact with the wall, Thea noticed that Panhang's telekinesis in the room had completely dissipated, and she knew he must have fainted. Alright, he's unconscious. What brought you all this way here? Thea thought, quickly finishing her sentence and getting out of here. The toad's horrible state meant Hal Jordan had become Green Lantern, and according to the film's chronology, Parallax was about to make his appearance. Thea didn't want to stay here any longer. In the movie, Hal Jordan fully utilized Earthlings' intelligence by throwing any monster into the sun, and the sun lived up to its expectations, incinerating any enemy. But how could that be possible? The Parallax had destroyed countless galaxies and stars, so how could he fear the sun? Now in the real world, Thea preferred to believe that a higher being, for unknown reasons, had repelled the Parallax. It's better to say that Hal Jordan, a new Green Lantern, defeated the Green Lantern Corps' age-old enemy than to say that Damian Wayne, after just 1 day of magic training, could defeat Merlyn. Amanda had originally planned to use Oliver's information to contain Thea, but now she couldn't grasp Thea's power level, and she was hesitant to act rashly. She had to activate a backup plan. We don't know why you wanted to build the temple, but we helped you with government connections. Don't you admit that? But I just saved you. Don't tell me that guy on the ground with his swollen head just bumped into the wall and knocked himself unconscious. Amanda's attitude softened, and Thea's tone naturally slowed. The two of them bantered cordially, as if nothing had happened. Amanda smiled, her dark skin highlighting her bright white teeth. You saved me privately. I used the name of the AOM to help you with this. This is official business. I'll compensate you privately later. What compensation? Thea calculated the time, and based on what she'd said, Oliver was definitely in her possession by now. She assumed she didn't know, so she had to pretend she didn't. Understanding the plot was a struggle. There were so many things she couldn't explain. The so-called personal compensation meant handing Oliver over to her, right? Damn it. Saving her for nothing. What's that all about? Hasn't Batman been in close contact with you? Can't I just contact him? The mere mention of Batman filled Amanda with rage. The Joker was Amanda's favorite villain leader, intelligent, yet incredibly crazy, and without superpowers. If she had the Joker, her plans for the villain squad would be more than halfway complete. Unfortunately, Batman wouldn't budge. Even Amanda calling him personally was useless. There was no room for negotiation on the Joker's issue. She couldn't honestly tell Thea that their AOGC had fallen through the cracks with Batman. She could only evade the issue by saying, Batman's been busy lately, and we saw you were free. Thea naturally ignored this. What's my free time got to do with you? The president's free time, too. You dare give him something to do, then tell me the truth. Why did you call me here? Xiao felt that time was precious and she really didn't want to waste time talking to her. She would agree to easy things and say she couldn't do difficult things. Chapter 268 Hoaxing. Murphy's Law is sometimes incredibly accurate. The more you fear trouble, the faster it arrives. Just as Amanda opened her mouth to speak, a terrifying, vast, overwhelming mental force descended from the sky, instantly crushing the consciousness of several people. Amanda held on for a moment before fainting. Damn it. I should have fainted. Thea reflexively endured for a second, now regretting it bitterly. If she had fainted like Amanda, nothing would have happened. But her feeble resistance had immediately drawn the other party's interest, playing a game, and exponentially increasing the mental pressure. Thea felt as if her meager mental strength was a small boat in raging waters, while the other party was like a raging sea, sending violent waves every second. She could only concentrate hard to face the various emergencies. Several times, Thea felt her mental strength had reached a dead end. She couldn't imagine the consequences of such a dead end, but she relied on her mind's perseverance to repeatedly regain clarity. She didn't know how long she'd been under this mental attack. When she regained control of her body, she found herself half kneeling on the ground, sweat pooling all over her body. Her clothes looked washed, but she didn't bother to worry about them. She pushed her damp hair from her forehead, obscuring her vision, and stared straight ahead. Sure enough, the toad, who had been knocked unconscious earlier, stood up again. Its swollen head was replaced by an indistinct yellow light. The mental fluctuations that had caused her such a mess were emanating from there. An inspector demon? Unlike the inspector monster, which was born from the collective fear of all intelligent creatures. It was somewhere between the invisible and the visible. It carefully selected its host, and the parallax monster that merged with the host was named the Parallax Demon. It wasn't that Thea looked down on the toad. Even if he had begged to be her host, the inspector monster would have looked down on him. If she remembered correctly, he had simply accidentally acquired a few Parallax Demon cells while dissecting the body of the former Green Lantern. While others might be able to explain the true location of the Parallax monster's true form, Thea didn't know. The Parallax Demon, drawn to the toad's former cells, was whizzing towards Earth. The yellow sphere before her was clearly the product of that same cell's rapid multiplication. As for whether it was the Parallax monster or the Parallax Demon controlling it, Thea couldn't tell. Earthling, what are you looking at? You don't seem afraid of me. The yellow sphere detached from the toad's neck, and the headless body collapsed. The sphere seemed to take a slight interest in Thea, circling her twice and questioning her from the level of her consciousness. Nonsense. I'm scared to death. How can you tell I'm not afraid? Thea didn't want to distinguish between the Parallax monster and the Parallax Demon. She only knew she couldn't defeat any of them. Not even Horus in his prime would be a match for them, let alone herself. The sphere circling around her made her hair stand on end. It spoke to her in her consciousness, so startled she didn't dare to stand. No, you say you're afraid, but you're not. On the contrary, you're actually quite excited. Even more amazing, you seem to know me, right? You know who I am, but you're still not afraid of me. This is the first time in all these years that I've seen someone who knows me and isn't afraid of me. The yellow ball's signal became increasingly clear. Am I afraid? Thea asked herself, am I? Godbeast is definitely afraid of him, as is Yoga Khan, Eclipse, and a whole bunch of God's alts. The alts themselves are terrified. On the other hand, they're not particularly afraid of Darkseid, the Anti-Monitor, and the Dark Lord. Why not? Because they've been defeated before. Parallax, while incredibly powerful, is being suppressed by Sinestro and treated like a dog. He's familiar with this plot. His initial fear was largely shared with those unmentionable figures, and when Parallax arrived, the familiar plot washed away much of it, so naturally, his fear of him was minimal. Thea wasn't sure if her guess was correct, but she slowly stood up and found the world before her more organized. The faint breathing of Amanda and the others, the chirping of insects in the distance, echoed in her ears. Her mental power seemed to have increased significantly, a rough estimate by Thea of at least 20%. She stared intently at the yellow ball of light. Shouldn't this guy be going to fight Hal Jordan and the Green Lantern Corps? Why is he circling me? Just as she was wondering if she should say something, the yellow ball of light suddenly began to emit a strong vibration. This time it wasn't a mental shock, but a kind of aura. Without waiting for Thea to speak, it enveloped her in the aura, opened a passage out of thin air, and disappeared into the secret base. Thea watched herself enter the passage within the yellow aura. The speed of the thing was so great that she didn't even have time to react, dragging her into a bizarre world. Her existing worldview was completely shattered here. Mountains were flowing, and the sea was still. Gravity was absent. Strange creatures, seemingly only seen in dreams, drifted through the air. Giant, inky black trees chased a three-headed rabbit. The world felt chaotic and chaotic, devoid of hope or rationality. This is the antimatter world, one of the negatively mutated universes at the bottom of the universe, the yellow halo explained to Thea for some reason. Thea's thoughts were far outpaced by the halo's speed, and they quickly left the antimatter world. The halo completed 7 rapid jumps, finally performing a dramatic slam dunk, flinging Thea out of the halo. With a deft somersault, Thea landed on the ground. The feeling of groundedness was wonderful. There was gravity here. This meant this was the material world. She had no plans to live in nothingness for 100 or 80 years. Where was this place? She glanced at the sky. Very good, very strong. The illumination came from gray-black clouds dotted with tiny specks of green light. Occasionally, a deep crimson glow emanated from behind a gap in the clouds. No matter how Thea looked at it, she couldn't believe it was a star, but rather a celestial phenomenon caused by a unique planetary gravitational pull. This was definitely not Earth. The air was low in oxygen. Despite divine transformation, Thea still felt uncomfortable being suddenly thrust into such an oxygen-depleted environment. Compared to the nearby buildings, it was clear that this was the highest point. She was perched atop a mountain, incredibly tall and narrow, standing tall and straight in the center of this supposedly city. Earthlings, welcome to OA. You are so strong, even without any ring's power, that you can breathe freely here. It's hard to believe you're from Earth, a voice boomed from the right, soft but clear and powerful. Thea looked over and saw a blue-skinned, elderly-looking dwarf floating not far to her side. Chapter 269 The Little Sister from Earth. Before she finished speaking, several more short, blue-skinned aliens appeared around her. Thea counted 7 of them. Welcome to OA, Earthling. We are the Guardians of the Universe, the leading blue figure repeated calmly, as if fearing she was still startled. Are these Guardians? Beings claiming to have lived for countless years, they seemed unremarkable. Thea didn't use the Eye of Horus, but simply took the opportunity to examine them. There was no trace of magic, no divine powers, and at less than a meter tall, not to mention physical damage. These beings possessed a unique life form, but beyond that, they possessed no apparent strength. Did you pull me here? Thea was interrupted by a green light flying from a distance before she could finish her words. A purple alien wearing a traditional Green Lantern tights walked out of the green light. Without even looking at Thea, he shouted dissatisfiedly to the Guardians floating in the air, "You want to recruit another Earthling? Wasn't the lesson of Hal Jordan enough? The Earthlings have weak wills and are not suitable for the Green Lantern Corps." The dwarfs waited patiently for the newcomer to vent his dissatisfaction. Only after the purple alien finished speaking did they slowly begin to explain. "Sinestro, we didn't recruit her. She was pulled here by yellow energy. We just found out about that, yellow energy." Yellow Lantern, the purple-skinned alien named Sinestro was shocked by the news for a few seconds. He immediately realized something and turned to ask the Guardians, "Have you made the Yellow Lantern ring? My will is enough to control fear. Give me the ring and I'll destroy the Parallax Demon." But his bold words met with no response from the Guardians. Another green light reached the mountaintop, and a figure emerged. "I will never allow you to sacrifice Earth. It may be young, but, Hal Jordan, who had hurried over from Earth, was stunned by the sight before him. Who is this young woman dressed so remarkably like an Earthling? He tried to finish his words, but found he had forgotten what to say. He stared blankly at Thea, his mouth wide open. Hal Jordan, often called her, was truly foolish. Thea felt no joy at meeting a fellow countryman. She felt she was embroiled in a massive dilemma. You're from Earth? Without a lantern ring? Without transformation, how can you adapt to this planet's oxygen and gravity? Hal Jordan, forgetting his purpose, pulled out his lantern ring and scanned Thea. He discovered she wasn't some alien who looked like an Earthling, but a true Earthling. But how could that be possible? This shattered his newly reconstructed worldview. Were all Earthlings so physically fit? Could I be a fake Earthling? Sinestro, Hal Jordan, this Earthling's name is Thea Quinn. She was summoned by the Yellow Lantern ring, which we crafted just 3 minutes ago. The leading dwarf thought for a moment before deciding to speak frankly. Hal Jordan was still preoccupied with the question of whether he was actually from Earth. If he wasn't, why would he risk his life to defend Earth? You're kidding. How could this Earthling be recognized by the Yellow Lantern ring? Not only is she a weak Earthling, she's also an Earthling woman. Sinestro pointed at Thea and loudly vented his displeasure. The Guardians understood Sinestro's frustration. After all, he had originally promised the Yellow Lantern ring, but now Thea had appeared, suggesting they were going back on their word. They were being wronged. This was the Yellow Lantern's will, not theirs to control. Several people communicated through telepathy. The leading dwarf said, "Sinestro, you are the Green Lantern Corps' most powerful warrior. We trust you, but this Earthling was also personally chosen by the Yellow Lantern. You must prove yourself stronger than her before the Yellow Lantern will recognize you." Sinestro could think of several Guardians who were wary of him wielding both green and yellow lanterns, out of their control, but he was still amused by their flip-flopping. "How do you expect me to prove it? Does this woman have combat capabilities, or are you planning to send 2 Earthlings together?" The birth of the Yellow Lantern ring is a historical necessity. While we may be the founders of the Green Lantern Corps, the Yellow Lanterns are also part of the fabric of the universe. Sinestro, your concerns are completely unnecessary. We will not hinder them, but only facilitate them, the leading dwarf explained. You will fight it out in the Green Lantern Corps arena. Earthling, what are your thoughts? The dwarf turned to Thea. At this moment, Thea's mind was churning. Yellow Lantern ring. It actually chose her. Shouldn't it have chosen Sinestro at first sight? Honestly, Thea didn't appreciate this so-called emotional power. It was too ethereal, without any real impact on her. On a life level, all lantern ring bearers were mortal, including the seemingly powerful Sinestro. His lifespan was limited to a few years longer than his fellows. When his lifespan expired, the lantern ring would simply fly away, and any honor or victory would be fleeting. These people associated the yellow lantern ring with fear, as if it were a power of immense evil. But Thea, a master of magic, saw it differently. Light wasn't good, and darkness wasn't evil. This theory held true across the emotional spectrum as well. Artificially defining emotions as good or evil was ridiculous. Fear could bring people immense confidence. Isn't Batman a living example? On the other hand, Thea didn't believe she had the power to control fear. She feared many things, and that was fundamentally different from Sinestro's iron will. But now the lantern ring was waiting for her right before her, with no prerequisites to complete. It would be a shame to give it up in vain. Adhering to the time-traveling principle of obtaining it first, even if it's not useful, Thea decided to challenge Sinestro. Several guardians flew first to a nearby hilltop. Sinestro, his face livid, followed silently. "Can you fly? I'll take you with me." Hal Jordan still hadn't figured out what had happened, but seeing Thea's exposed belly button and long legs, he wanted to help his fellow Earthling. "Don't touch me, I can fly on my own." Thea waved her hand, refusing his help. After the parallax monster's mental suppression, her mental strength had reached a new level. The magical reactivity of the OA air was far higher than on Earth, allowing her to fly with her own magic. While not as fast as the Green Lanterns, the distance was not far, and Thea landed effortlessly in their arena. Hal Jordan arrived last, stunned by the sight of Thea's flight. Without the aid of her lantern ring or any other technological equipment, she simply flew away. It took Hal Jordan a long while to realize that this woman was no ordinary creature. The water on Earth was much deeper than he had imagined. Thea's independent flight was nothing to the Guardians, but it was a real shock to Sinestro, whose life form was still within the normal range. Having traveled through countless star systems, he had indeed seen planets with life forms far beyond the local norm. Although he still expressed disdain, his inner vigilance was already at a high level. Chapter 270 Thea's Courage. In Sinestro's eyes, Thea was a unique species within the local food chain. Through some unusual transformation, they possessed abilities far superior to their peers. Hal Jordan's glazed eyes told him that this was definitely not the average Earthling. With this in mind, Sinestro's anger at the Yellow Ring's choice subsided. He had previously dismissed it as a ploy by a few Guardians, but if it involved a powerful individual, he wasn't afraid to compete. "No. This is the Lantern War. What's the point of removing the ring? I reject this proposal." After deliberation, the Guardians proposed that Sinestro remove the Green Lantern ring and fight Thea. If Thea were just an ordinary Earthling, like Hal Jordan, Sinestro wouldn't be afraid without the ring. But now that Thea could fly, he felt a little uneasy. While many species in the universe could fly, humanoids were few and far between. At least if Sinestro removed the ring himself, he wouldn't be able to fly. So, without a second thought, he rejected this unfavorable proposal. Sinestro insisted this was a war between the lantern rings. After another silent exchange, the Guardians finally yielded. "Miss Thea, do you have any objections to using the Green Lantern rings in battle?" Thea's ability to fly also slightly changed their attitude, and they stopped calling each other Earthlings. "Can't the Green Lantern Corps use it, too?" Thea didn't want to work for these immortals who had lived for hundreds of millions of years. "You can use a temporary ring." A light green ring materialized in the void before Thea. At her nod, it automatically slipped onto her right middle finger. A flood of information flooded her mind, and Thea realized her previous assumptions had been somewhat limited. The power of the lantern rings was very similar to magic. Magic was eternal, and the power of emotion shared the same properties. As long as life existed, these emotions would endure. The power of the lantern rings did not repel magic. The two tentatively intersected, each discovering the other's unique qualities. In a miraculous temporary fusion, these two ancient, eternal forces merged. The Green Lantern required willpower and courage. Through magical training, Thea's willpower surpassed that of most intelligent beings, but what about courage? She asked herself, did she possess it? Through the power of the lantern ring, she saw a part of her heart she had never faced. Malcolm had said she was a natural warrior, and it wasn't a lie. The spectrum of emotions reflected a green ocean within her. This was the true reflection of her heart. Whether facing Horus or Ares, she bravely charged forward, possessing a courage she wasn't even aware of. A green light surged in all directions, centered around her. At the very center of the vortex, Thea raised her right hand, completing her transformation. Fortunately, it was only a temporary ring, eliminating the need for the vows she considered shameful. However, the green and black bodysuit was automatically applied to her without any consultation. Amazing aura. This level of power is unleashed upon you just wearing the green lantern for the first time. I've never seen such power. I admit you're a great warrior. Sinestro's grumble faded. That was the truth. His pride wasn't enough to disregard the other person and spout nonsense. But, this is strange. Why did the Green Lantern choose that Earthling over there instead of you? Strength earns respect. And Hal Jordan, already unwelcome, has automatically been relegated to just that Earthling in Sinestro's words. He wasn't alone in his confusion, nor were several Guardians who had lived for countless years. Could it be that the ring's selection process was faulty? Even though he hadn't seen Thea in person, judging by her power alone, he could tell she was several orders of magnitude stronger than Hal Jordan. Hal Jordan, unaware he'd been mistaken for a faulty program, enthusiastically explained the principles of materialization to the Earth Girl. Anything you can imagine can be materialized by the lantern ring. My experience is to start with some weapons. Are you an American too? You're so young, have you ever touched a pistol? Let's start with a pistol. At first, Thea listened to his ramblings, but then realized his imagination was meager. A pistol? What a joke. A device more imaginative than imagination. What good would a pistol be? The mage's knowledge rivaled that of the veteran Green Lantern, who had traveled across countless universes. Thea, possessing that time traveler memories, was even more imaginative. She quickly selected a suitable entity for the battle, shaping it with immense courage and finalizing its detailed outlines with sheer willpower. A green monster appeared in this distant galaxy. From a distance, it resembled a giant tree, but closer inspection revealed its branches were composed of 50 heads and 100 arms, each wielding a razor-sharp giant sword. This was a legendary divine creation, a divine abomination that shouldn't exist on Earth, a 100-armed giant. Hal Jordan, who was beside Thea, analyzing the process of materializing a pistol into a mortar, nearly bit his tongue at the sight of this massive monster, clearly no pushover. He was completely speechless, especially after seeing how lifelike each face and weapon looked, completely lifelike. He retreated into a corner, drawing circles. Even Hal Jordan, even if he was slow-witted, could tell that Thea was far superior. He couldn't help but blame the previous Green Lantern who had given him the ring. He must have been so badly injured and misjudged him. He was just an ordinary Earthling, and he truly didn't have the talent to be a Green Lantern. Amazing talent. You've achieved this level of skill with your first encounter with a ring. You're a formidable force. I apologize for my previous dismissive remarks about Earthlings. Sinestro, undeterred by his opponent's strength, excitedly materialized his own form, a green giant identical to himself, wielding a massive axe. He roared at Thea's 100-armed giant without a shred of aggression. A larger physical form doesn't necessarily mean greater power, but rather, a larger form reflects the stronger emotions. Sinestro's Titan stood 70 meters tall, while Thea's was only 50. While Sinestro might appear to have a significant advantage, considering the length of time both had been in contact with the lantern ring, and the temporary removal of Thea's ring, the difference isn't significant. On the contrary, Thea's hecto-armed Titan surpassed Sinestro's in sophistication, which explains his devotion and even his apology to the Earthlings. If all Earthlings possessed Thea's qualities, they would have unified the universe long ago. To demonstrate his respect for his opponent, Sinestro activated the lantern ring's language function, switching it to Earth English. "Let's begin," he said. Materializing 2 more swords. Hearing such an alien speaking English was indescribably awkward. To avoid laughing, Thea forced a hard frown and materialized a 2-handed sword as well. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 271 Thea vs Sinestro. The two began the battle by controlling the Titans behind them. Controlling so many arms simultaneously was a challenge even for Thea, with her mental fortitude. Sinestro's Titan was new to this kind of attack, and the two fought extremely conservatively in their first round. The 100-armed Titan's attacks were relentless, but the damage inflicted was minimal. Sinestro's Titan, experienced and composed, calmly countered a few blows, realizing the opponent wasn't particularly strong, and gradually began to counterattack. As Sinestro's true form wielded two long swords and slashed at Thea, Thea, already heavily absorbed in the manifestation, began to struggle. With a dart, she repelled Sinestro, dispelling the 100-armed Titan and replacing him with a burly figure wielding a spear and wearing a horned helmet. It was an old acquaintance of Thea's, the god of war, Ares. Thea knew Ares well, and coupled with his divine nature, her moves were familiar to her. Ares, standing 50 meters tall and wielding a spear, was a perfect match for Sinestro's 70-meter axe. Freeing up some of her mental energy to counter the equally skilled Sinestro, the cross-handled English two-handed sword seemed alive in her hands, slashing at Sinestro's waist. Sinestro's 2-meter height made it difficult to reach Thea, who stood only 70 feet tall. After a few exchanges, he realized he couldn't fight on land and decided to fully utilize his advantage in the air. He materialized chains, attempting to restrain Thea's feet. Seeing his movements, Thea materialized Diana's lasso, also entwining Sinestro's arms. The two exerted their combined strength, rapidly closing the distance between them. Thea discarded the lasso and aimed her two-handed sword at Sinestro's chest, aiming for a fatal strike. Sinestro, somewhat flustered by her desperate approach, manipulated his green light energy to levitate, dodging the piercing blow. However, he found himself trapped in a web before he could rise much higher. Green Ares, engaged not far away, risked a blow from his opponent's axe, yet launched a massive green web of light towards Sinestro. Sinestro's ascent was halted, and Thea had already launched herself into the air. With a resounding clang, Thea's two-handed sword pierced the giant green shield Sinestro had conjured, shattering both weapons simultaneously. Once Sinestro had returned to the sky, he had no intention of engaging in ground combat. He extended his arm, aimed his lantern ring at Thea, and a beam of green light shot out. Thea followed suit, conjuring a green shield to neutralize the damage, then drew two long swords to meet Sinestro, wielding his great axe. The fierce battle between the two naturally attracted the attention of the nearby Green Lantern caller, who flew to the periphery of the arena to observe. Initially believing her to be a new ally, a scan of the lantern ring revealed a shocking discovery: the woman was from Earth. "Do you know her?" several of those close to Hal Jordan asked. After all, Thea was the owner of a publicly traded company, so searching her information on the ring was easy. Hal Jordan didn't recognize her at first, but as time went on, he finally matched her with Earth's information. While he'd managed to identify her, he wasn't pleased. Hal Jordan felt his understanding of Earth was too superficial. The daughter of the chairman of a publicly traded company could fight Sinestro, the greatest warrior in the Green Lantern Corps history, to a draw. Their identities were completely unrelated. Were the aliens too weak, or were the Earthlings too strong? He couldn't figure it out. Facing his fellow Green Lanterns, Hal Jordan could only smile wryly and say, "She's a public figure. I know her, but she doesn't know me." The Green Lantern ring's built-in language translator was incredibly powerful. Several Green Lanterns from different planets actually understood the meaning of the term public figure, leaving them stunned. What Hal Jordan could imagine, they could imagine too. If just any Earthling could match their greatest warrior, how powerful must Earthlings be? Sinestro naturally saw the vast Green Lantern Corps converging. He didn't want his men to see him go on like this without taking down a single new recruit. He activated his lantern ring's energy, leveraging his greater experience to try to overpower them. He materialized a torrent of emotional energy, raining down swords, axes, and energy bombs on Thea. Though slightly outmatched, Thea remained undeterred. This battle was unfair from the start. How many years had they been using their lantern rings? She'd only been using them for a few minutes. If she could defeat them, she'd be dead. She embraced Sinestro's attacks with a learning attitude. She absorbed Sinestro's combat experience like a sponge, her knowledge and magic corroborating each other, a thrill she felt. The match reached a stalemate, and Sinestro unleashed every last drop of his magic. He felt he'd never been so serious in training before, determined to defeat Thea. But as he continued to exert his strength, Thea's mastery of the various uses of the lantern rings grew with his demonstrations. The situation on the field remained stable for a long time, with Sinestro at 6 and Thea at 4. Neither of them was able to break the deadlock. Of course, if this continued, Sinestro would undoubtedly win, but he disdained such a victory. In public, He defeated a newcomer who had only used the lantern rings for a few minutes by relying on a protracted battle? He had the nerve to do it. In contrast to Sinestro's impatience, Thea grew more and more confident. The greatest warrior? Nothing more. The lantern ring's primary energy source was emotional conviction. Her confidence grew, and without her noticing, her attack power intensified. All the Green Lantern Corps members, except for the newcomer Hal Jordan, who had been dealing with the Green Lantern rings for most of their lives, noticed Thea's steadily growing confidence. What did this mean? It meant she was confident she could win. They didn't dare to interrupt their fight, and could only exchange surprised glances. Some were still praying to their planet's gods. Lord Sinestro, you must hold on. If you lose, we'll all be ashamed. Sinestro, naturally observing Thea's slow but steady growth in faith, was somewhat incredulous. The mighty Sinestro, cannot be defeated by you. He gathered a flood of emotional energy into his hands, his arms like clockwork, tirelessly blasting a stream of energy balls at Thea. Thea began to dodge the blows, using her shield to withstand them when they proved unavoidable. Finally, Thea manifested wings, increasing her aerial mobility. This wave of Sinestro's outburst lasted a full minute before he paused, concentrating on his results. Chapter 272 An accident happened. In a cloud of smoke, Thea spotted Sinestro's weakness and took 2 green energy blasts. Then, unleashing the Green Lantern Corps' favorite green emotional chains, she bound him 3 times, securing him from head to toe. Still feeling unsure, she mimicked the 6 staff light prisoner, conjuring 6 luminous green beams to squeeze Sinestro tightly. Only then did she breathe a sigh of relief. A hushed silence fell outside. The entire Green Lantern Corps on Oa had arrived, in disbelief that their leader had been defeated. Many silently cheered Sinestro on. But their silent support had no effect. Instead, it filled Sinestro with shame. He had fallen to such a state. Thea's restraints were so tight that he couldn't break free despite repeated attempts. But his determination proved effective. Despite his anger, Sinestro remained composed, commanding his Titans to abandon their advantage and come to his rescue. Sinestro's Titans were already overwhelmingly superior, confident they would soon defeat Thea's Titans. However, they had no choice but to abandon all hope and rescue the trapped Sinestro. Thea, naturally, would not allow him to escape. She continuously materialized various ranged weapons, joining forces with her Titans to launch a frenzied attack on Sinestro, but their attacks were completely absorbed by Sinestro's Titan, whose original height of 70 meters quickly shrank to 50, its body riddled with pits and dents. However, his sacrifice was worth it. With his help, Sinestro finally escaped and recharged the Titan's energy, stabilizing its size. The rapid depletion of the lantern ring's power dissuaded him from a quick victory, and he flew into the Titan's body, allowing him greater control and restoring his greatly depleted stamina. There's such a thing. Thea, who had always believed that materialization involved fighting separately from the original body, had learned another trick. Following suit, she too flew into the Titan's body, and with a brief familiarity, she gained control of the multiplied form. A giant resembling Ares took full control of her, as if a god from Earth's ancient past had returned to Earth. On this planet, countless light years distant, Ares roared with a deafening roar, his body brimming with battle intent. Though smaller than Sinestro's giant, Ares held a far greater imposing presence. With spear in hand, he bravely met Sinestro's axe-wielding opponent. The aura surrounding Ares' giant was one the Green Lanterns knew best: courage. Unparalleled courage. Even if the Green Lanterns wanted to help Sinestro, they were completely stifled. Such a noble quality was beyond question. Sinestro, with his iron will, could face any foe. He, too, cast aside his reservations and fought fearlessly. The battle intensified. Sinestro's mastery of the controls and his power far surpassed Thea's. Thea, on the other hand, possessed a superior martial skill, constantly seeking opportunities to inflict heavy damage with her masterful technique. The battle between the two escalated in scale, exhilarating. Inexplicably exhilarating. Thea felt a surge of joy. The stronger her fighting spirit grew, the more her Titan form resembled herself. The Ares' divine essence, acquired that day, was rapidly merging. Originally, she had absorbed less than 20% of it in the previous 6 months, but with Thea's fighting spirit amplified 100-fold by the lantern ring, her fusion progress accelerated rapidly. After just a short battle with Sinestro, she had fused over 50% more. Unexpectedly, the lantern ring had such benefits. Thea's previously indifferent attitude subtly shifted. If those old men gave her the green light, should she accept it? The effort and reward seemed disproportionate, a difficult choice. When Sinestro repelled another of Thea's attacks, even her strongest willpower began to falter. Thea exemplified the saying, the more you fight, the stronger you become. The battle, originally at 6-4, was threatening turned into draw. Sinestro launched a reckless attack, unwilling to continue. Whenever a Titan was injured, he would replenish it with the lantern ring's energy, trading wounds for wounds, a battle of who had more energy. Ignoring Thea's skilled combat skills, while the scene was a bit awkward, it's undeniable that this rogue attack truly hit Thea's weak spot. She had only recently obtained the lantern ring, and the time it took to transform her emotions into energy was far greater than Sinestro's. Gradually, her stamina began to wane. When her energy was depleted, even courage was useless. This was Sinestro's plan, simple and brutal, using his strengths to attack his opponent's weaknesses. Defeat me. It won't be easy, Thea cried out. Her Titan, overwhelmed by her own intense emotions, finally took on her true form. The god of war's will seemed to merge with hers. The god of war could be defeated, but he would never concede defeat. Countless phantoms emerged behind Thea's Titan. These were scenes of Earth's ancient ancestors, slashing and burning to cultivate the land and battling the heavens and the earth. Unyielding. Tenacious. Fighting to the bitter end. The Titan, spear in hand, stamped its feet against the earth, charging towards Sinestro's Titan with unstoppable momentum. Your resilience is admirable, but you can't defeat me. Sinestro, her direct opponent, was fully aware of her every change. Undeterred, he channeled new strength into the Titan. He materialized a seemingly thick shield, ready to withstand Thea's powerful blow. Despite his composure, Sinestro wavered slightly at the impact of Thea's overwhelming momentum. He sheathed his great axe and channeled all his energy into the Titan, raising his thick shield to full height. Silence fell as everyone waited for the final act of the battle. Feeling her aura reach its peak, Thea leaped upwards with all her might. Her nimble form seemed to merge with the authority of Horus, the god of war's bravery with the fierceness of an eagle. She had a premonition that her opponent would be unstoppable. But something unexpected happened. Boom! Thea's giant exploded violently, sending powerful waves radiating in all directions. The green lanterns present hurriedly created a barrier to block this surge. Thea, drenched in dust, ignored Sinestro, who remained on guard, and flew towards the Guardians, angrily exclaiming, "What kind of lousy ring is that?" It exploded. Fortunately, she noticed it in time and radiated the energy in all directions, otherwise she, at the center, would have been in danger. The blue-skinned dwarf Guardians were speechless. A makeshift ring, what do you expect it to withstand? They hadn't considered the maximum energy it could withstand. The makeshift ring was primarily for training and orientation of the new Green Lanterns. Who among the new recruits could handle it as hard as Thea? They hadn't anticipated it. Chapter 273 The Yellow Lantern Ring's Judgment. Their conversation was naturally overheard by the Green Lantern Corps and Hal Jordan. What did they mean? The ring exploded. Hal Jordan, having witnessed Thea's entire battle, was increasingly certain that this young woman was from a different world than himself. Especially with that final blow, though he only felt the aftermath, he knew he couldn't stop it. The iron-willed Sinestro was a bit bewildered. Initially, he thought it was Thea's ultimate move, concealed behind her shield, but subsequent events confirmed his misconception. Having trained countless legionnaires, he had no idea a makeshift ring could be artificially inflated and ruptured. The emotion must have been intense. Seeing the battle falter, he dematerialized and caught his breath. This battle had taken a toll on him. Faced with Thea's questioning, the Guardians couldn't agree. Some supported Thea, some supported Sinestro, and some advocated for a rematch. The leading blue man consulted several others and made the final decision. Sinestro is the victor of this contest. I didn't hear you. Say it again. I refuse to concede victory. Thea was immediately furious. This was clearly a quality issue. I didn't lose. Although Sinestro desperately wanted the Yellow Lantern ring, his pride wouldn't allow him to accept such a victory. This wasn't victory, it was humiliation. The two men flatly rejected the blue man's verdict, nearly irritating the leading blue man. He wanted to continue the fight, even to the death. However, to maintain their authority, they had to stick to their words, even if they were wrong, and hesitated for a moment. As they racked their brains for a better solution, an unexpected disruptor offered them a way out. Elders, Earth is in danger. I implore your assistance." The voice was Hal Jordan, the somewhat amusing yet righteous newcomer to the Green Lantern Corps. While this Earthling might be a bit weak in combat, he had a keen eye. The leading blue man no longer chastised Hal Jordan, saying gently, "You're right. Maintaining peace in the universe is our duty. You go first, and the follow-up troops will be here soon." The passionate young man, Hal Jordan, was tricked by the old man into heading to Earth as a scout, and happily flew out of the way and headed for Earth. The remaining Green Lantern spectators were sent back to pack their equipment by the Blue Men under the pretext of saving Earth. The once bustling arena was now only occupied by the Guardians and Thea Sinestro. The Guardians summoned the ring, which glowed with a constantly pulsating yellow light, from the void, without mentioning the previous battle. "Now, let the Yellow Lantern ring choose its user. Who'll go first?" Thea hesitated, but Sinestro stepped forward. "I'll go first." Thea, eager to see the proceedings unfold, nodded her approval. After all, her resolve was not as strong as Sinestro's. Sinestro removed his Green Lantern ring, took a deep breath, and walked over to the floating yellow ring, grabbing it. A cry of pain echoed throughout the square. Sinestro's massive figure was instantly knocked to his knees, his mouth emitting various incoherent sounds from time to time. His face was contorted, and sweat oozed from his purple skin. His hands unconsciously grasped the dirt, and the veins on his palms bulged, looking quite hideous. Thea was startled. Was she really mistaken? This was so painful. Seeing Sinestro's facial features squeezed together, like an expression of childbirth, she felt a little uneasy. Was this the legendary man who conquered the Parallax Monster? Wasn't he the one who recovered a yellow ring today in the original timeline? In fact, her guess was probably correct. Sinestro had indeed not reached his historical peak, and the battle with Thea had consumed a lot of his mental energy. While the Yellow Lantern's birth was inevitable, several Guardians didn't want it to happen so soon. They exploited his impatience and set up this trap, denying Sinestro time to recover and forcing him to face the Yellow Lantern in a weakened state. It was a blatant conspiracy. They underestimated Sinestro's potential and ambition. Knowing the odds were stacked against him, he plunged headfirst, relying on his conviction and determination. To the Guardian's disappointment, after half an hour of mental pressure, Sinestro's voice was nearly shattered. He eventually overcame his fear of the Yellow Lantern. Though the process was extremely difficult, and he sat down exhausted, he undoubtedly earned the Yellow Lantern's approval. Several of them couldn't deny it, but Thea caught the worry in their eyes. "Miss Thea, it's your turn." Though they held little hope for her, they had plenty of time, so it wouldn't hurt to let Thea try. If Sinestro had the strength, he'd surely object. What a joke. "I've already earned my approval, and you're still letting her go." But by this point, he was exhausted, struggling to hold himself together. The fact that he could even sit upright was a testament to his immense willpower. Thea nervously stepped forward, imitating Sinestro's movements and grasping the Yellow Lantern ring. A revolving screen flashed before her eyes. The first scene that caught her eye was a failed exam. Thea scoffed. "I didn't write a single word, but I have money. Just fill in the grade." Is that considered fear? The death of her parents saddened Thea slightly, but she chuckled softly at the sight of Moira being killed by Deathstroke and Malcolm being blown to pieces. Deathstroke could crush Malcolm with a single blow. It was rare for him to kill him, and even if he died, he would die with a smile. What a mess. When the screen showed Diana being burned on a cross, Thea burst into laughter. It was hilarious. Diana was a demigod, one of the most powerful. Could mortal fire kill her? Nonsense. The next few scenes seemed to correspond to the time travelers she had merged with, but they were blurry, and the images were ethereal and fake. Thea glanced at them and didn't take them seriously. When the yellow ring transformed into a giant that looked a bit like Darkseid, and Thea blinded him with a steel chisel, the yellow ring froze and stopped appearing in the scene. What exactly did the yellow ring mean? Thea couldn't help but wonder, is this thing destined to be with me? Isn't it too obvious that it's giving me this? In fact, if the yellow ring had a human form, it would definitely have a helpless expression with its hands spread out. Did Thea feel any fear? Of course she did, but who were the people she feared? The giant beast of God or something like that? The Yellow Lantern ring, which is based on the Parallax Monster, couldn't create any of these people, not even their shadows. Chapter 274 The Choice of the Yellow Lantern Ring. The beings Thea feared were all beings beyond the bounds of the rules, while the Parallax Monster remained within them. Naturally, The yellow lantern ring had no power to replicate them and scare Thea. The emotional spectrum sounded impressive, but those beings were capable of completely erasing them from the rules, a fate it didn't want to risk. Yet, Thea's fear was firmly anchored in these beings. The parallax monster understood Thea, fearing them too. It tried to find new loopholes in its mind, but the fear they possessed was too overwhelming. The remaining fear, when spread across other scenes, created a host of almost comical illusions. The parallax monster was the yellow lantern ring's lantern beast, the two intertwined. Now, Thea was afraid, yet not afraid of the parallax monster. This created a logical paradox, and the somewhat rigid lantern ring was stumped as to how to make sense of it. The lantern ring froze in a state of near-frozen logic, and Thea's consciousness automatically returned to her body, revealing that everyone was staring intently at her. Sinestro, with his bull-eyed gaze, had a particularly exaggerated expression. "Why are you looking at me?" Thea noticed the ring hadn't finished its test and was still blazing brightly, so she didn't dare let go. Sinestro asked in frustration. I'm afraid Sinestro was frightened by her laughter. Was he mistaken? You can laugh after all those terrifying scenes? Or do you Earthlings use laughter to express fear? It was terrifying. He couldn't help but wonder, could it be that he hadn't conquered the yellow ring and was still in a state of illusion? Several Guardians and Thea exchanged bewildered glances, trying to understand what was going on. You're out in just 2 minutes, she looked calm, not frightened. These Guardians, who had lived for countless years, were completely baffled. They waited in silence. Another hour passed, and the yellow ring's light suddenly surged, then contracted dramatically, repeating this pattern several times. Just as Thea was wondering if she had also shattered the yellow ring, the ring finally emerged from its logical impasse. The continuous release of energy weakened the yellow ring, leaving it floating limply in the air. Sinestro and Thea watched nervously, hoping they would be chosen. The yellow ring flew repeatedly before them, their minds torn between Sinestro, who had overcome his fear of the rings, or Thea, who was unfazed by the parallax monster. To improve his chances of selection, Sinestro removed the green ring for a second time. No one in this timeline had ever worn 2 rings simultaneously. Although Sinestro believed he could surpass his predecessors, he wanted to gain their approval first, leaving the rest for later. Several Guardians observed his casual removal of the green ring, silently communicating their thoughts. 10 minutes passed before this selection process. Sinestro, now a bit weak, had removed his ring. The previous battle and a test of his mental strength had been immensely taxing, and he simply held on, awaiting the outcome. Thea, on the other hand, was in a much better state, her mind less anxious than before. She felt comfortable with the choice, and it didn't matter if she chose or not. When she released her Green Lantern transformation, her original clothes reappeared. She pulled a piece of gum from her bag and chewed it while awaiting the outcome. The yellow lantern ring ultimately remained undecided. A strange rhythm flickered within it, and before the Guardians' delighted eyes, the first ever yellow lantern ring finally split in 2, each placed before the 2. Intelligent life has been identified. Thea Quinn of Earth, you possess the power to inflict immense fear upon others. Welcome to the Yellow Lantern Corps. Intelligent life has been identified. Tall Sinestro of Karuga, you possess the power to inflict immense fear upon others. Welcome to the Yellow Lantern Corps. The ring before Thea was light yellow, while the one before Sinestro was darker yellow. Both were puzzled, and a few cunning Guardians suppressed their joy and feigned kindness to explain. This ring, unable to determine which of you is most suited to it, has chosen to split. You must cherish it. The ring, which could have been a source of trouble, chose to split itself. While the first ring lacked the power to command rings of the same color, it was always the most powerful and richest in heritage. Their guardian, the founder of the Green Lantern Corps, deeply hated the birth of the Yellow Lantern ring. However, the laws of nature and the supreme beings forbade them from delay, so they diligently forged this first Yellow Lantern ring. Originally, Sinestro had been forced to make the choice, but Thea's unexpected intervention today had siphoned off a small portion of the once formidable Yellow Lantern ring. With a majority of its power, Sinestro would be unable to sustain himself for a short period, a fact that nearly delighted them. Thea was unaware of their secret plans, she only knew it was time to claim the spoils. Sinestro was in such poor condition that he didn't immediately accept it, so she didn't mind. The emotion she sensed from the ring didn't seem to be rejection, but rather a touch of friendliness. Without further hesitation, Thea reached for the yellow lantern ring and recited the oath attached to it, representing her true feelings. Dark day, bright night. Evildoers and treacherous gangs fear my divine light. Ghosts and villains cannot hide. The yellow lantern burns eternally, shining brightly throughout the ages. A pale yellow glow engulfed Thea, instilling all sorts of knowledge in her within seconds. When Thea reappeared before the others, she was wearing a yellow and black outfit. A portion of the yellow energy was originally needed to transform the body of the lantern ring's wearer. After all, many lantern ring users are ordinary people, but Thea's physical strength far exceeded the ring's transformation limits. This energy had nowhere to go, so it could only be used to transform her clothing. Her shoulders, arm guards, and boots were pale yellow, while the rest of her body was black. The high stand-up collar framed her slender neck, and on her chest was the traditional yellow lantern core symbol. As Thea learned from the indoctrination, this symbol represented the parallax monster, a somewhat abstract insect figure. Unlike humans, she also wore a long, thick black cape, with a larger yellow lantern core logo emblazoned on the back. A traditional yellow lantern could call it a day at this point, but Thea inherited the first lantern ring of the yellow lantern core, which stipulated her responsibilities. She still had one more thing to do. Without time to contemplate her acquired abilities, Thea extended her right hand, bearing the lantern ring, and dragged something from thin air. It was a thick book with brown-yellow pages, bound in a metal covering and chains. I am Thea Quinn of the Yellow Lantern Core. I declare the Book of Parallax my own. Chapter 275 Their respective abilities. Sinestro's eyes nearly popped out of his head at the sight. He hesitated for a moment, only to be beaten to the punch by Thea. No longer concerned with his own mental state, he grasped for the yellow lantern with a resolute determination. Fortunately, the ring didn't trouble him again, allowing him to reassure himself. After a moment's hesitation, Sinestro recited his yellow lantern oath. Dark day, bright night. Evildoers and treacherous accomplices, fear my divine light. Fear fire, burial. Those who defy me perish. Fear is the source, eternal light. At the last line, Sinestro hesitated, but didn't dare mention Sinestro's authority. He wore a yellow and black tights, matching Thea's clothing. He paid little attention to his clothes. Like Thea, he pulled a massive ball of yellow energy from thin air and declared, I am also the leader of the Yellow Lantern Core. I am Tall Sinestro. I declare that I will control the Yellow Lantern ring's overall energy and create new ones. Thea felt a chuckle at this. After her disruption, the original Yellow Ring's power had been reduced by half. Sinestro's dream of going solo had been thwarted before it even began. Even if his ambition remained, it would require even greater dedication to realize. Perhaps he couldn't even rebel, and would remain a lifelong employee of the Green Lantern Corps? Imagine if he became Iron Sinestro. That wouldn't be so bad. If Thea felt a little amused, those old blue men almost laughed out loud. Even with hundreds of millions of years of acting skills to hide the joy in their eyes, it was hard to stop. Several people feigned seriousness as they watched Thea and Sinestro review their newly acquired abilities. The exchange between their minds could only be described as light-hearted and joyful. Yellow Lantern had become such a monstrous state, its initially powerful energy split in two. And Sinestro still wanted to defect? Just get to work. The danger of their general defecting was greatly delayed. They were all trying to contain their excitement, fearing that any glimpse of excitement would irritate Sinestro, their strongest fighter. Thea said, reviewing her newfound abilities. It was a shame. While the original Yellow Ring's power remained superior to other rings of the same color after being split, many of its functions had inevitably been compromised. The two Yellow Rings still possessed the abilities of materialization, shield, high-speed flight, and wormholes, but Yellow Lantern's powerful ability had been unfortunate enough to be split in two. This ability was called Instill Fear. Originally, the lantern rings would identify a target's fear and amplify it tenfold or 100-fold, terrifying the enemy to the point of paralysis. But now, Thea's ring had gained the ability to peer into the source of their target's fear, while Sinestro had gained 100-fold amplification. Such a powerful ability, dismantled and destroyed. Thea was relatively well off. Finding the source of fear was a short film, and then combining it with her own magic to cast an illusion could be quite effective. Sinestro was in a terrible situation. He had no magic skills, so who knew what his enemies feared? It was a blind cat catching a dead mouse. He had to try them one by one. Both of them were dismayed at this. But after all, Sinestro had gained most of the abilities: energy twins, environmental replay, invisibility, light refraction, cell regeneration, and energy absorption. Thea gained phase shift, space warping, emergency teleportation, and a somewhat unbelievable ability: Kryptonian recharge. What the hell? Did the Yellow Lantern ring also have some of the power of the sun? Thea studied it for a long time, but couldn't figure it out. She only knew that the Green Lantern ring could mimic the radioactive wavelength of kryptonite, but the Yellow Lantern ring, in contrast to the Green ring, could actually recharge, one damaging while the other replenishing. Thea sensed the deep malice of the world's will towards the Kryptonians. Taken together, Sinestro acquired skills that were all oriented towards combat, while Thea only had skills for running away. This made her speechless, and she truly felt the Lantern ring mocking her from a spiritual level. If there's any benefit to splitting the Lantern ring into two, it is that when facing the Blue Lantern ring that restrains the Yellow Lantern, it will go from being very restrained to being restrained. However, from Sinestro's expression, it can be seen that although he has obtained most of the Lantern ring's abilities, the old man is not satisfied, extremely dissatisfied. The Yellow Lantern ring did not bring about earth-shaking changes in his strength. As a self-proclaimed leader, he had no power to restrain Thea, not to mention that she also possessed the Book of Parallax. Guardian, may I ask what this book is? Thea looked at it for a long time. Apart from a few hieroglyphs on the cover that automatically told her the meaning, there was not a single word in the book. It was a blank slate. What's the use of it? The leading blue figure explained to her word by word. The parallax origin originates from the origin wall, the edge of the universe, the source of all existence. Its true location is unknown, but the yellow energy originates from the antimatter realm. You must have passed through the antimatter realm on your way to OA. It defies science, logic, and reasoning. It's the antithesis of all our rational existence. The Yellow Lantern ring's energy comes from there, the Guardian said, gesturing at the yellow energy in Sinestro's hand. As for the book you hold, it's the Yellow Lantern core roster. Every member will be branded with their name and abide by the rules you two established. Merits are rewarded, and faults are punished. It may have other benefits, but you'll have to discover them yourself. This book is similar to the Green Lantern core book of OA, but you'll have to collect the energy from it yourself. Thea nodded. Isn't it just a roster? Sinestro recruits people, records their names, and distributes various benefits? According to the old gang setup, Sinestro was the red stick, responsible for recruiting people for fights, while she was the white fan, handling logistics. No problem, just get your name on it first, Thea thought, as she printed her name on the first page, line 1, under Sinestro's murderous gaze. I'm the leader. I should be registered first. Sinestro, furious, pointed at Thea, almost speechless. HMPH, don't think I didn't see you. You just secretly made a rechargeable Yellow Lantern, didn't you? Why don't you give me one? Thea had already seen Sinestro's little trick. Wasn't he bullying her for not knowing how to recharge those lantern rings? Huh. We know so much more. Thinking we could control Thea with this lantern was just wishful thinking. Sinestro had no choice but to use yellow energy to create a lantern and handed it to Thea. Thea examined it, tested it with the lantern ring, and it recharged. Then she handed the Parallax book to Sinestro. Sinestro used his lantern ring to write his name in the book. Seeing it listed second, he felt incredibly frustrated. But he had to admit he truly possessed the bearing of a powerful leader. Though furious, he remained calm as he discussed various rules and regulations with Thea. Sinestro, who didn't dare to defect from the Green Lantern Corps anytime soon, was a man of considerable experience. Thea managed a publicly traded company, and developing various rules and regulations was a piece of cake. The two quickly came up with a rough draft. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.